Looks like we're getting sunny in Whistler, British Columbia. Wait, looks like gonna give us the love. Let's see. Still waiting. These long, awkward pauses of Ash Church. I can't tell if I'm live or not. Am I live, everybody? Am I live? It looks like I'm live. All right. Wonderful. Wonderful. Welcome, everybody, to Hash Church 7, episode 15. Connection's not the greatest. I'm at a hotel right now. I'm on my shitty laptop. Hopefully, you guys can hear me okay. Let us quickly go through some of our sponsors before we let anyone in. So give me a second. We're gonna start it off. My good friend Thomas. Hey, Hash Church fam, you ready to take your grow to the next level? Grandmaster LEDs is bringing the heat with cutting-edge lighting solution designed for growers who clearly demand the best. Whether you're battling pests or chasing perfect yields, we've got you covered with the latest innovation. The UVC Tarantula Predator, this is the craziest thing I've seen in a long time, the ultimate IPM bug light. This bad boy harnesses the power UVC technology to zap mites, thrips, AIDS, and more, keeping your garden pristine without chemicals or hassle. Pair it with a Grandmaster LED top-tier grow light, and you've got a setup that's unbeatable for potency, flavor, and peace of mind. Waterproof, daisy-chainable, and built to last, the Tarantula Predator is your new secret weapon. Tune in to Hash Church to hear the pros rave about Grandmaster LEDs, then grab yours at grandmasterleds.com. And you can use the code HashChurch15 at checkout for an exclusive discount. Light up your grow the Grandmaster way because your plants deserve the best. So that's HashChurch15. But we still got to let everyone know there's so many copycats out there looking for the original bubble bags. You want to hit bubblebag.com. We stand out as the premier choice for water hash extraction, and it's no surprise why. We're the original innovators who set the standards for quality and performance. We've crafted them with durability in mind. And these bags have lifetime warranty, ensuring you're covered for years of consistent use. The team behind Bubble Bags takes pride in their pioneering legacy. That's me, backing every product with unwavering confidence and a commitment to excellence, making them the trusted go-to for enthusiasts and professionals alike, top-tier extraction. At Puffco, huge shout out to Puffco as always for sponsoring Hash Church. Puffco, Jolly Roger, Chelsea, James, the whole team has absolutely revolutionized cannabis culture. They've normalized extracts with their incredible portable devices like the Puffco Peak Pro, the Pivot, the Proxy. These amazing units deliver top-tier performance and style, making them favorites in our community. Puffco's unwavering support for all things cannabis keep us lit and united. You can check them out. Puffco's got your back, www.puffco.com. All right, well, we've gotten that out of the way, right? We always got to shout out to our sponsors because without them, well, you know, where are we without our sponsors? Huge, massive shout out to all the sponsors. Shout out to everyone in the room today. I am in Whistler, British Columbia. I'm here for the World Snowboard and Ski Festival. It's just been a really amazing week up here. I've been up here for the last couple of days with my family, and we've been racing off to different races. There's been different grind competition. There's been just a whole lot of fun. Today is something called the Sup. My family's going to go a little bit before me. Ahmad, Sunda, your camera is sideways. Nobody can see it yet, but you might want to work on the logistics of your camera. And Dr. David Allen could probably help you because it's happened to him before. And welcome, Dr. Allen. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning. How are you doing, Marcus?
I'm doing really good. It's nice to see you in the room, bright and early. How are things in Mississippi?
They're really good, thanks. Beautiful weather.
Wonderful. Wonderful. For those of you that don't know, Dr. Allen and I have a show called the Cannabis Journal Club. We started pretty quick and consistently in the sort of early part of the year. And then we had a bit of a glitch to film a while. And so we did manage to film a couple of shorts. Did we film the whole episode too? I think we did. We filmed 3 things recently. All 2 are really cool statements, and one is quite a powerful episode. So I thought it would be good to have Dr. Allen on today, because he's always fun and amazing to have discussions with, and he's still, he still very much has that perspective, which I think is important, that that they're not done coming for us, that they haven't just let us have cannabis. Sometimes we can feel that way, but there's still a lot going on behind the scenes. There's a reason why cannabis is not taught in all the medical schools. There's a reason why cannabis is not used in hospitals the way that it should be. But I will say, Dr. Allen, I do see nurses seeming to be more and more open to the use of cannabis for their patients. Even throughout the US, I've seen it in Michigan with Alzheimer's patients, where basically these nurses just decided, look, we gave them some, it helped, we just kept giving it to them. Alzheimer's patients sitting in a room drooling, half an hour, 45 minutes after being given a dose of cannabis, they're up dancing, listening to their favorite records. So pretty cool concept. I think it was Gary Brecka, and I could be wrong, who talks about dementia and Alzheimer's being a type 3 diabetes, and that you don't lose your memories, you merely lose access to your memories. And if you lose access, then that must mean that you can regain access. Welcome to both Colin Palmer and Dr. Mark Chaldone into the room. Lovely to have both men.
Morning, guys.
Good morning, Mark.
Morning.
Marks.
Morning.
Marcus.
Ahmad
Marcus
Sunda is in. Yeah, I'm in the house. Ahmad Sunda has his camera correct now. This is a brother from the Third Eye Organics, and I can't remember. I'm so confused with this. I don't know if it's the gentleman I actually met in Barcelona who put the sweet skunk live hash rosin under my nose and let me take a dab jar check. But if not, it's his partner, or vice versa. They work together. One doesn't come out of the light and one stays in the light. So we'll see if he makes it back. But yeah, I wanted to invite him in today. We do have Jodie Giesz-Ramsay. I always make a mistake on her newest name. She had Mark Emery's name, the Jodie Emery, but she is no longer a Jodie Emery. She is a Jodie Ramsay Giesz. And she's got herself a whole new life going on with a great guy that she's met. She came in and talked about that with us a while ago. And she's finally managed to get her store, a cannabis culture store, back in Ontario. So pretty excited to see and hear from her. And otherwise, I'm just sitting here with a couple of tools. This was very convenient the other day. I have not been a huge fan of the Proxy. Most people who puff tough find the Proxy to be a little bit of a lightweight hitter. But years ago, I heard Jolly Roger say to someone, it's a sipper, not a ripper. Yep. And that kind of sat with me. And I ended up chilling and smoking this at the base of Whistler Mountain yesterday while we watched the World Snowboard Grind contest. It was my buddy's birthday and his brothers were there, and I was there with my family. And it was just such a nice, this is the new terracotta little pipe, but I just felt kind of debonair with my Sherlock, just puffing on the bottom of Whistler Mountain. Not quite as lovely as what you're smoking on the Swiss Perk. And why am I spacing on the cactus work? I know that's a collab with. Tell me before
Darby.
I look stupid. What's
Darby.
that? Darby Holmes. I apologize, Darby. That's terrible of me. Like, oh my God. But yeah, very nice piece. Love of the Swiss Perks. The first time I ever met Nate Dizzle, I flew to Amsterdam. He was there at the airport with Steve Hops, and I was supposed to be getting a ride from my manufacturer's son, who's a German fellow, and he rolled up in this big van. And he he was picking us up in Amsterdam, but he pulls me aside. He's like, listen, I can't drive you to Germany. Something came up. And I'm like, well, what are you talking about, dude? You're our ride. We have no ride. He's like, yeah. But just take my van and you just go. So I'm like, ooh, okay. Like, all right, I don't really like, all right, I'll take your van. And so he set it all up for us. So this was years ago, really kind of before we had good GPS in Canada and North America, but they did have pretty good GPS in Europe still. So there was a GPS unit on the van. And I don't think we made it to the German border before someone pushed a button and changed the language on the GPS to something that was neither English nor German. And we just, the whole rest of the way, we had to listen to this weird language. Of course, Hops pulls out a little piece, and now we're like chuffing on the way from the Dutch into the German border. Don't do that. That's not safe. That's not smart. But we did it. We passed the border at like 2 a.m, and there was literally nobody at the border. And I guess it was one of those border crossings on the German Dutch border where they just go home at night. They're just like, oh, we're just gonna, like, the shift's over. I'm like, well, that doesn't happen in North America. The shift is never over. They never leave the border. They're always there. So that was an adventure that I got to have with those guys. So good to see you, bro. Welcome. You want to maybe give a little introduction and tell the Hash Church what Third Eye Organics is all about?
Yeah, man. Third Eye Organics is all about delivering the purest possible product that we can. When it comes to resin, it's something we take really seriously in the manner of, I'm like the younger guy to the crew. The Wizards are a group of like 45, 50-year-old fools that used to grow on the East Coast when it was felony, and it was mad illegal. When every like piece of resin mattered, because it was actually going to send you to jail if you got caught. So you couldn't just throw it in a turkey and toss it across the room. You actually care and do everything real careful. And just kind of brought that energy here to LA. I mean, the whole like Third Eye kind of lore is that they come to LA to be able to grow and or to be able to stop growing, honestly, because all the songs talk about LA having the good weed. Everything is about LA Kush. They come out to LA. The weed is mids. It's the same commercial nightmare we're dealing with today. A lot of like big gangster grows and not, and always the headies, no matter where you go, are hard to find. People tell me like, they're sure there's some headies out there. Like, I'm sure there is, bro, but some guy's sharing it with his friends and they're not letting it out the circle. So like, what's it matter to us if it exists, but we can't access it, right? So they come out here, there's no fucking headies. They pop up a tent and they start growing again. Fast forward 20 some years, I find them at Masonics and I smoke a joint, and it's the best joint I've ever had. And just, the rest is history. It's been 6 years now, about 5, 6 years, and we've been rocking, bro. I've been putting up the herb and the resin against everything I can find in the world. Like, I literally travel the world looking for terps, challenging people to bring me something better. I'll pay whatever price. I do whatever I need to do to be exposed to the best resin in the world. And I truly believe that this resin and this herb outstands almost everything I've ever seen, ever found. So to me,
Well,
what Third
I'll
Eye is,
back you up.
yeah, and a lot of people will, like a lot of people that have tried it out of nowhere. I mean, for me personally, one of my favorite things is really the interaction I get to have with somebody when they get to experience a resin this pure, whether it's smelling it or smoking it, just the raw reaction. I almost wish I had a GoPro on my head and I could film it and like share that with you guys, how people get so happy and excited and this and that. And some people even come at me with a biased perspective because we have quite a high ticket, and some people aren't a biggest fan of that, but then they smell it and it just brings them back to 2000 or brings them back to whatever, like really nostalgic, powerful smells, real odors, and I think one of the reasons that we really have that strength is because the way we grow is really like, I call it natural. It's just light. Like the plants aren't pushed a certain direction or the other. We try to grow it to where the plant gets to have like as heirloom as indoor experience as you can get. And that allows the plants to push off really strong expressions. So, we hear a lot of like, oh, I haven't smelled sherb like this since this year, or I haven't smelled like this since this year, since this came out. And it's like, yeah, because a lot of people, once the plant loses that's like real vigor, they start growing it with chems, they push it one way or the other, and it loses its like beautiful natural expression. Whereas our whole goal is to just let the plant do its thing and just appreciate the genetics and the cannabis for what it is.
Absolutely. Well, it was, for a variety of reasons. I won't say that it was only the best dab I had while I was in Barcelona because it was, so unbelievably amazing. What it was to me was just a perfect expression of the sweet skunk, something that I have more experience with than most, let's just say. And for the last 25 years, I have people all the time going, you got to try this sour, you got to try this Romulan, you got to try this blah, 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 blah. And it's just not what I want it to be. Now, when you're talking about, I wish I had a GoPro so you could, we could experience the excitement. Listen, in 1998, 99, when I started turning people on to making water hash and nobody knew how to make it, bro, I wish I had a GoPro because I was literally could have been recording the beginning of this whole dab solventless culture. And man, I called it the eyebrow raise. It was the eyebrow raise always happened. You put the water and the ice and the weed in, and everyone was like this. They were just like, what the fuck are you doing? But when you pulled that first bag that had golden resin on it and it came up and the water went down and there was just that little log of resin on the bag, people's eyebrows would go up. They'd be like, oh, and then they would smoke it. And back then, a huge percentage of people would lose consciousness. People just weren't used to it. It just was it doesn't happen. It's very rare nowadays. So many people are now smoking concentrates and it's available. But I'm telling you, in the late 90s, it was so unavailable that it would be nothing to knock 3 or 4 people out at a concert, to knock maybe 30 or 40 people out at a Cannabis High Times Cup over the course of 5 or 6 days. Like Toker's Bowl at Mark Emery's event. I'll never forget this Texas guy going, I smoked cannabis for 25 years. Let me see what you got. And I gave him a dab. He was an older guy. He was in his 60s. And he just went over like a tree, like a wham. Got back up with a look on his face like, what was that? So I loved the dabs that you guys had in Barcelona. The sweet skunk dab was definitely it was interesting too, because I had been sitting, Jolly Roger and I do not know each other super well. We had a very, very rough introduction to one another. It was kind of this just super off. I coughed in his face like an asshole. He got mad at me and, berated me. And I kind of was like, who the fuck is that guy? And he was like, who the fuck is that guy? Clearly 2 brothers from another mother that should have connected a different way, but that's how we connected. So, we made up. He invited me to do jar check at Eagle Clash. Obviously, they're a huge sponsor of Hash Church here. And so I went over to Eagle Clash and I hung out with him for a very short period of time. And it didn't take long before he's like, well, what are your favorite? I'm like, look, I love everything that's been expressed to perfection. I don't care what the flavor is. I'm not like, oh, it's got to be sour. It's got to be got a gas. It's got to be a fruit. I love the best expression of whatever the cultivar is. And that is, it keeps me happier. Like, what the fuck? I want to limit myself to like this swath of a cultivar that one person in the world can grow. And if so I want to broaden my horizons and say anything that's been grown to near perfection, that's my favorite. And so when your jar came across the table, it went to Jolly Roger first, and he put it under his nose and he looks at me and he goes, bro, I think you're going to love this one. He had already known from this short conversation that I was a terpenoline fan. Now, as Chimera has mentioned here on Hash Church before, one of the reasons the sweet skunk is so very special is not because it's dominant in terpenoline, but because it has a 1-to-1 terpenoline to ocimene. And so it has that really beautiful terpenoline initial flavor profile, but it's rounded out and softer and sweeter with the ocimene 1-to-1. And when that jar got put under my nose, I was like, damn, this dude really gets me. I was like, he really gets me. It was, it was kind of like the jar check as well. For those of you that are wondering, it's not a given that we're just going to dip into a jar and take a dab. So, Third Eye Blinds, they were kind enough to be like, yeah, dude, if you want to have a dab, go ahead. And so I was able to take a nice dab of the sweet skunk live hash rosin, which I'd never had in my entire life. I'd had sweet skunk flower and sweet skunk bubble hash. I just never had sweet skunk live hash rosin. And it was like an old friend visiting me in Barcelona from British Columbia. Like, oh my God, I haven't seen you in ages, bro. How are you doing? So that is how the Third Eye Organic, Hash Church, Bubble Man, Jolly Roger, Puffco, Ego Clash, Jar Check connection happened. So we're stoked to have you here. You are also, I bumped into you guys at the Frenchy Cannoli Calabash event.
Yeah.
Where I got to see the jar again, and my good friend Ryan Lee was there, Chimera, who obviously was there with us during that time. He was in that very small group of people through Breeder Steve. Others knew immediately. So real here on church, stoked to to help give you guys some exposure down there. I definitely know that you guys are serious in the sense. I mean, he was telling me that the yields on some of that sweet skunk to live hash rosin were just, it's not something you're going to get without really, really, really digging deep into the piggy bank. This is something special. And I think there'll always be a place for something special in cannabis, especially because I know 90% of the cannabis community, the expanding community, not the prohibition-based community that we all kind of came up in, but the more expansive soccer mom and grandmas and bitches and all of these things, it's always going to be a certain mid-grade quality. But I think the more that group grows, so too the more will the connoisseur group grow. And that's definitely what we're about here on Hash Church. All about the connoisseur and the connoisseur level. I want to shout out John Howe for hooking me up always. He's got his event horizon here. These heads are like diamonds. Just puffing them in the at the event the other day, and then I've also got a little papaya bang bang, which just has the most incredible. I've left it out of the freezer, so it's greasing up and it's really letting out its bouquet. I usually keep this hash in a freezer, which is it robs you a little bit because those bouquets, those if you're preserving everything, and especially fresh frozen and cold chain all the way, you're really just holding these monoterpenes, which are fine. People love them, but for many, many decades, what we did with those is we cured them out so that the severe set, the sesquas could a new bouquet could take its place. And you really notice that when you preserve your hash in a freezer versus letting it sit out on the table that first time you open that jar, especially a papaya or a guava or a strawberry, that kind of rotten fruit really just settles in nicely into the jars. I'm going to open this one again and take another whiff. God damn, what are you puffing on over there, Third Eye?
I was waiting for you to take a dab. I didn't know how, if we dab together in Hash Church or what the etiquette is.
Dude, you dab, we dab together, we dab alone, we dab, dab. I'm in a hotel under like a fire alarm, but whatever.
One thing I wanted to speak on that I really related to and appreciate that you said is I'm kind of the same way when people ask me what strains I like, especially when I'm out and about and we're not talking about Third Eye. I just tell them I like anything grown properly. Like if you grow it properly, it could be a strain I don't really like. Oreos. If you really grew a great batch of Oreos, I would smoke it and I would appreciate the fact that there's no residuals left in the smoke and that the smoke is pure, even though it's not my favorite strain. So I really resonate with that because that's really the crucial thing. Some people get so obsessed with hunting down a strain that they ignore the real quality of the resin just because it smells a certain way or this and that. But you really got to be thinking about the fact that this resin that we're smoking on captures any residuals or extras from the growing process. And for me with dabbing, it's so crucial because the way that the pain, if you pass me a doobie of some weed I'm not sure about, I could take a soft hit and then notice, okay, that kind of burns my lungs and respiratory system. I don't want to hit this anymore. I'm not going to hit this much harder. But with a dab, you kind of can't do that because you can't rip a dab slow. Then it's going to make you cough like crazy because the smoke's not going to cool down off the hot banger. And so it's kind of one of those things where you have to send it to try oil. And if the oil's not pure, you won't know until that exhale and that pressure and those residuals start kind of singeing your chest and stuff. So it's really, and then I just wanted to comment. This was some 14-week indoor. All this, the dog haze and the sweet skunk. We ran them for 14 weeks indoor, and our yield to full spec on the Sweet skunk was 0.9%. So definitely why you don't
Skunk
see
Man
it.
Sam would be proud of you.
Yeah. Oh, and I wanted to tell you one more thing. Do you know that like it was a very closed loop, like full circle moment in Spain, because we only ran the sweet skunk to hash because you specifically told us in the DMs that like it would be amazing. You said something along the lines of like it'll yield really bad, but it'll be like the best hash anyone's had. That's why we ran it. That's why I thought it was almost
No
funny that
way.
you were surprised to see it, because I was like, oh dude, you're the reason that we washed it, because like we were DMing each other
Yeah.
and you told us, yeah, this will make like the best hash. It'll yield like shit. And we were like, we do this for the culture. Like we lose money on our hash, even though it's expensive, whatever. Like our flower goes for a lot. So it's at the point where it's like we run hash just to really make a statement in the cannabis community to remind people what the fuck rosin's supposed to smoke like so that they get. And that's how I think of Third Eye as like a caliber. It's like a calibration tool. It goes back to what you were saying about growing strains properly. This was our first time ever growing sweet skunk. So every time from here, it's only gonna get better. And that's the thing with Third Eye. I think if you grow runts, you should try our runts, because it'll be, and I'm not the grower, so it's not like I'm promoting myself and I have a big head. It's the Wizards are the ones that grow it. I just represent it because I genuinely believe it's the best resin in the world. But if you grow sherbet, if you grow OG, you should get a jar and try it, because it's a good calibration tool. The same way you'd put a 5-gram thing on your scale to make sure it's weighing it right. It helps your brain calibrate what runts is supposed to smoke like, what real weed is supposed to smoke like. So then from that point on, you can judge the other things you're buying or judge your growth.
Totally. So that's crazy, dude. I did not remember that. I get hundreds of DMs every single day on my Instagram, and I can't keep them all together in my head. So I might have had like 1,500 DMs in the week that I got your DMs. But I was super surprised, dude. I had no idea anyone was gonna roll up with the sweet skunk. You should try to grow that one day as well if you can get it somewhere. Some of the nicest I ever made, I statically sifted, and it was for months, like 6+ months. And I remember I've told the story before. I took it to Amsterdam, and we were at Hank's. Hank, who owns the Bulldog, has an apartment in the Leidseplein in Amsterdam above the Bulldog. And so I think breeder Steve was staying there. Someone was staying there, and we were all kind of hanging out and having a party. And Tony from Sagamarta Seeds, kind of an old school breeder, he was like, hey, what do you got, Bub, man? Like, I know you're smoking on something nice. And he's an old school guy. So I pulled out this dry sift and I loaded him up a big fat dab. And, he ripped this dab and blew it out. And it was the unique thing about this dry sift, because we cured it so well, it was still like the best expression of resin that it could be, but it was dry and it was cured. And so there were no monoterpenes in it. It was literally just the most beautiful bouquet of what you want. And I'll never forget him exhaling that and going, oh my God, bro, that was so smooth. What was that? Like, oh, how did you make that? And we got into this whole conversation of how a lot of the younger folks really like these grab you by the nut terpene and volatile organic compounds that they preserve them right from the beginning. Well, from the beginning of our seemingly short-lived culture of growing prohibitively and indoor, we've always kind of cured those aromas out. And so now we're living in a very unique time where everyone wants live resin and live rosin, and they want to preserve as many. I mean, fuck, people are doing live dry sift, right? Like mechanical separation with liquid nitrogen and then static separating. And it's real.
Is that what people do when you see whole plant fresh frozen static? Is that what it is? Is liquid nitrogen?
Well, they could be using liquid nitrogen. They also could be doing whole plant fresh frozen and just washing it and then staticking the bubble. So to pretend they're doing something that nobody else knows about, but there's not that many things that nobody else knows about. And most of the things that we all know have been shared fairly widespread. I mean, this show alone has spread some amount of cannabis breeding, process, smoking, whatever it is. So Got a good little crew in the chat room right now. Coming around, you heard Joe there. We talked a little bit on Hash Church last week, and we talked about it a little bit in our filming of Cannabis Journal Club. But why don't we mention kind of a little bit of a call to action in regards to the experiment that you did some years ago, just the cliff notes. I want to kind of mention it each time to put the feather in the hat of the people that are watching, that we are going to be doing a call to action soon, looking for interns to help us with a very specific project. And I'll let Dr. Allen explain what that project quick.
Yes.
That's you. Explain it. Explain what we want to do with calling around to the
You're breaking up a little bit.
up. I just saw that. Can you hear what I said at all? Or Colin, maybe you heard what I said and you could explain it to him, because no, you didn't hear. I'll just text it.
You broke up a bit.
How about you guys just talk about whatever you want, and I'll just probably stop talking because I'm just breaking up.
Well, how about the guy with like the 3D background introduces himself? I wasn't familiar with him. We had the doctor in here, and who was the other fella?
Hey man, Colin Palmer, Vessel Life Science. I met Marcus in, I think, late 90s. We kind of got introduced to each other. I got Marcus's sets around 98, like 99, right when he released his first set. And we were on the forums together, kind of throwing ideas back and forth. I'd always ask, like everyone asked questions. He'd share photos. We'd shoot the shit. We got really close on this one chat, like live chat called True Stoners. And it was just, all the original guys that I remember trading clothes with back in the 90s were on that.
Okay.
And, that's my background from the East Coast. Been growing, since 96, and here we are. It's been a journey.
Where
Like
are you based out
yourself,
of?
I'm based out of New York, so I have a
Okay,
license
very
in New
cool.
York State. What you were saying about every little bit matters, that I live that, right? And, in New York City, we had spots up in Vermont, we had spots in Pennsylvania, but, it all went to New York, right? And New York had, a culture of people that we were servicing and trying to bring, the small glimpses of what we believe to be the best resin to them,
Mhm.
and like yourself, we tirelessly spend hours in the lab just working on it. It's like making music to me. You're just constantly working on it, whatever part of it might be, whether it's recording or working on scales or inversions or whatever it might be. We take that same approach to our craft and to the science behind what we do. And we really put our minds to really trying to create really pure resin, like yourself and others around us. We're all chasing the same thing. Even 25 plus years later, I'm still chasing that same glimpse of the first time I pulled the bag and saw that little bit of resin out of the bubble bags, that it was so pure. And like Marcus, like I did it wrong in the 90s, right? All the way to figuring out how to do it right. And I think much like art, when you're making hash, you're chasing that idea, may not be obtainable, right? Physically or in the physical space, but it's the concept of pushing it forward in your space and your craft. So I think, that's really what I draws myself to this, is really the idea of the constant, right? When you do something, there's reward, but there's also a balance and a thread of a lot of different ideas coming together. So it's exciting to me, even all these years later. I love the fact that I get to talk to Marcus every Sunday, and we met each other through the internet like 20 plus years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we became friends in real life through this plant, and this idea of making hash. And I'm just forever grateful to have this journey. You know, it's really, it's passion, you know, like this is, you know, someone asked me the other day, like, what made you want to sell hash? I was like, nothing really made me want to sell hash. It was really the love of the game made me want to participate, you know, and that's really what it is for me, you know, and I think for all of us, it sort of is like that, I think, you know.
Yeah.
We love this, you know, Mark loves science. I've always loved science since I was a kid. You know, I'm lucky to be able to play in a field that it encompasses it, right? I respect it so much, and I'm constantly learning. You know, it's really cool to be able to have these conversations. And like you said, it's, you know, taking care of you know, genetics is a it's a labor of love, but then you get to the reward of that through the action of taking care of it, and then you know, harvesting that, going through that whole modality, and then getting to extract it. So you know, that's a it's a very deep process, you know, and there's a lot of subjective and objective things within that. So I really
You know,
you know, that's how I look at it.
since we're kind of bringing up science and stuff, like one thing for me that's really important in the cannabis world is like what makes science science is that anyone that applies and kind of thinks about a certain topic, we have certain things we completely agree on, right? And those consistencies is what allows different people to do different experiments and come together later and share everything, and we're all on a consistent platform, right? My one thing with cannabis, the cannabis people, the people that are in the high positions of cannabis that kind of make the decisions of what's good and what's bad and things like this. We, it's almost like, I mean, I would say like I'm relatively spoiled just to precurse this, right? So for me, I smoke third eye all the time. And like, hopefully, I'm going to be in New York for 420. So on 420, let's link up. I'll give you some dabs. I'll give you some smoke. And then we can come back and do this, or you can just come on here and you'll have more context of what I'm kind of getting at here. But you know, there's some people that'll pass me something that they're very proud of. They've been growing it for 20 years, this and that. And this is why some people don't like me very much, but I'll take a hit and I'm like, oh, I don't like that. That burns. Like that feels like, is your soil hot? Do you have a lot of worms? Do you mitigate your worms? Do you use this? Okay. Do you kind of mitigate that? Like you can be doing something for 100 years. And until somebody makes you aware of certain things or is like, you know, understands what the next level even is, you can't get there, right? Because if your micro ecosystem
Why don't you explain to everyone what you sell flour for? Why don't you let everyone know what people pay for your flour?
it's a good bit. It's like rosin prices.
It's like 70,
Yeah, just
Like we're talking about like
shoot it out there. It'll
like 400 a quarter.
okay. Yeah.
So it's some proper.
How much
and,
a quarter?
we're not even pulling a pound per flavor, you know. We're not got
Did you
no
say 400 a quarter?
Yeah.
Yeah, 400 a quarter, Colin. Where do you see 400 a quarter? Please explain this
Only in New
to me.
York,
Who's
but that's
paying where you
yeah.
but do you sell quarters
Yeah.
for $4?
On the regulated market, no. You can't even do, you would be hard to do that in any market, but if you can do it, that's amazing. I mean, it's like, you know, there's a few brands that hit that definitely, you know,
When, like I
it's
said, when you experience
yeah.
this, when I come to New York, I believe that, you know, your reaction to that number will make a lot more sense because you'll understand how absolutely rare it is to have something that's this pure. And
Oh,
I'll
I know it, brother. Like it's of the 0.25% that I get of things passed to me that even remotely comes into the vicinity of the things that we do, right? I totally agree with you. It's like it's an interesting place to occupy because you are such an outlier, right? Which is sometimes hard for other people to even believe, right?
Mhm.
To your point.
All the time.
And
Trust me, all the
but
time.
I live that, and I understand that intimately and respect it so much because that's where personally I think everyone should strive for that bar, man. You know, you're striving for bars, and
Well,
that's
I'll tell you what genuinely
really
happened for me
it's
is that
great.
I have other brands.
Hmm?
Before I found Third Eye, I was smoking on other brands that are of this echelon, right? They're similar in quality and whatever. It's other brands that are really doing the next level stuff, right? And I found the Third Eye, and then I was letting Third Eye go for like normal prices, and then it was the worst arbitrage of my life because I was letting the stuff go for less, and then I was going and buying stuff for more, that I
Yeah.
genuinely didn't believe was better. And I was like,
Sure.
well, what the fuck, bro? If you want a zip of this, you gotta buy me a zip of that. That don't make no sense, you know? Otherwise, I'll just pay that price for this to them and we're rocking and rolling. Everyone's good. So that's what I started doing. I was like, bro, this is my medicine. This is like, I don't push third eye as medicine. I don't, you know, because I want you to come to that conclusion yourself because I'm not going to tell you, you know, maybe this helps me with this and that helps me with that. And it's the reciprocal for you. I'm not trying to get you to get a jar of this because it worked, you know, just in general. I don't think any, it's very snake oil salesman-y. But obviously, this is a very medicinal plant. It's a beautiful plant. And when you find your way to use it medicinally, it can do wonders for you and keep you off of many, much more harmful chemicals. And so, just like you were talking about with the Alzheimer's and stuff, right? But you know, at that point, it is a medicine, and they can say that. You know, I just got some organic goodness for you if you care about that, right?
It's like organic food, you know. I say this a lot.
Exactly.
I've been saying this a lot lately. It's like organic coffee or anything you've tried that's been organic. Go back to the other way and tell me how that is, right?
Exactly.
And try to go back to that. And to your point, I think there is a lot to be said for that. But it's a journey, right? There's people that have to go through this journey, like you're kind of alluding to, much like you've went through, where you're like, wow, this is actually. I don't need to, this isn't selling anything on me. I'm attracted to this, right?
Mhm.
And
Like
that's a really,
that's
yeah,
why that's why we designed the
we're
jars like
like-minded, man.
this.
This is really cool. Like, yeah, I
We designed the
love
jars
the
in
way
this
you're
manner
thinking.
so that there's nothing. I'm not trying to trick you into getting this jar.
A
You know,
hundred, yeah,
I'm not
it's
drawing a
not
bunch of pineapples on there because it smells like
right.
pineapples. You know, it's like this is just some truth in this jar right here. And like maybe
100.
you hate the strain, but you can't argue that it's not like the best version of that strain that you've ever had. You know,
Yep.
that's
That's
two
what
different things.
that's exactly what we're doing in New York, man. Like we are very kindred spirits, man. It's just really back to the basics. Really awesome, well done herb that you can smoke and depend on and make good on that promise with. And that sounds really easy to do, but
Absolutely
sounds
not.
like what you're doing is beautiful. And Marcus, I mean, if Marcus really had that immediate reaction, I mean, it just speaks for itself, man.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And a little bit more background on me and why I'm when I was in high school, I was like that stoner, right? I was like I was every one of my friends' biggest smoking kind of friend, and all of my friends' parents knew it. So I was the guy that was like given the little duty of buying my friends' parents herb, right? Because they were just like professionals in a suburb, an affluent suburb, and they didn't want to deal with none of that. So like I became obsessed with like, okay, I have a big bankroll now. Like it doesn't matter. Like for me, I'm some kid. I'm trying to spend like $100 a zip or whatever, you know. Like I'm just trying to figure it out as like a sophomore, junior in high school. But they're like, yeah, whatever, bro. 50, 60, and eighth is fine. Just get me one. I just want this strain or whatever. You know, they're just shopping normal, comfortably. So that then allowed me, dude. I used to just take 18-year-olds to dispensaries. I'm from Orange County, so I would take like older kids to dispensaries and get to try all this fire, you know. And this was like obviously the 215 era where it's like it's not big facilities growing everything. It's like there is some big grows, but a lot of the stuff in dispensaries is a bunch of little growers just going to the dispo and selling their garage grow stuff. So you were exposed to so much more fire back then, bro. Like I even believe if that was going on, like I mean, I used to go to this place called Seven Leaves. If anybody in the chat like was from OC in the day, Seven Leaves in Buena Park, bro. The guy I used to take there hated going there because everyone there would be like terminally ill in the dispensary. He said, bro, like when I go here, I feel bad because like I don't even have anything wrong with me, and everybody inside is like in serious pain or whatever. The herb was unbelievable. It was like 20, 25 a gram all the way up. And they had a 4 for 44 sampler that I loved. And that's what I would get. I'd get my little 4 for 44, it'd be a bunch of smalls. But the herb would be absolutely next level. And if there's any way to get in touch with those Seven Leaves people, maybe through this platform, you know, because it's a big enough of an audience, yeah, that stuff was fire, yo. Shout out to y'all, you know. That was like one of the things that made me like always know that there's better out there than the average that I was getting, you know.
Absolutely. Am I still cutting out here? I'm kind of trying to close everything on my computer.
You
Little
kind of
bit, you're
you can
much
do it.
better.
Yeah, you were always like a little out and in. You can just go ahead and we'll tell you if it gets bad.
We'll get you linked up with Seven
Yeah,
Leaves.
I could turn off my camera as well. I wanted to welcome Jodie Giesz-Ramsay into the room. It's so nice to see you, Jodie.
Hey, Hey, thank you again for having me. It's been a little while and lots of stuff has changed in that time. But yeah, it's such an honor to be here on Hash Church for sure.
Yeah, we got Dr. David Allen in here today as well. Dr.
Morning.
Mark Sheldon and Colin. Smoke hash, not dope. That's your name that you got right now. Smoke hash, not dope.
Yeah.
That's what well known right now. So Jodie, I see you've been doing some pretty exciting things. I mean, my goodness, your journey. Were you like 18 years old when this journey started for you?
Well, I first smoked at 16 or 17, and then I moved to Vancouver when I was 19 and got right into the thick of the activism and protests and running for elected office, all of it. And then, of course, the DEA came up into Canada the following year and raided Emery Seeds and the cannabis culture headquarters. So, yeah, it has been a trip for the last 21 years of my involvement in this industry, for sure.
It's a real big full circle, though, when you think of like the store and the seeds and then the DEA and then the 5-year prison sentence and all the trips down to the US and all of that. Like, holy shit, Jodie, you have been through a lot in this industry.
Yeah, no, I feel like I could retire right now and feel pretty accomplished. But at the same time, watching legalization unfold, obviously at the beginning it was pretty distressing, I think. It's fair to say a lot of big corporate and powerful entities moved into the space and worked very hard to exclude the pioneers and the legacy industry. So I got a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth from that first few years of legalization. But, about a year and a half ago, I decided to go into a legal store here in Vancouver and see what was going on. And I was pretty overwhelmed by all of the options, but also confused because I wanted to support small local farms. I wanted to support independent operators. And it was very hard to tell the difference between all of the brands. In fact, I have a giant bag with me that I keep from. This is full of legal weed jars, bags, and packages because I was on a mission to find quality cannabis. And I want to highlight those good operators. We have big corporate factory farm weed, and then you've got the legacy pioneer small scale farms. And it's hard for the consumer to figure out what's what. I mean, I bought a bag and it had a logo from a group that I recognized as activist based. And then when I bought the bag and turned it around, it had the name of a big corporate entity on the back. They had bought out that smaller group. So I thought, oh, darn it, how do I find the good stuff to help support them? And so to that end, I've been spending over a year with my team at Cannabis Culture working on something we're calling the Cannabis Culture Collection. And I will do some little promos here. I'm not used to being a salesperson. I'm much more comfortable being a political activist, but we also have to remain in business to be able to exist, to continue advocating the way that cannabis culture always did. So we're doing this Cannabis Culture Collection, and the idea is packaging up in a cannabis culture bag the CC Craft Collection, packaging up 3 different farms per bag to highlight these flowers. So we've tested out a bunch of samples and we're choosing to highlight in our first release 3 farms that have done an exceptional job at craft cannabis and staying true to the roots. And that's Sweetgrass Cannabis,
Hell yeah.
Salt Spring Magi, and Seastone Farms. So this is 2 islands and out in the Kootenays doing incredible things. So our goal is to help consumers get a little taste of each brand. And then when they go to the store and they see those brands on the shelf, even if it's not in our bag, they'll support those brands and buy their product, even if it's from a government-run store. Send your money to the little guys who really need it to survive. So we also plan to carry it exclusively through direct delivery in independent stores. It's important to me to help these smaller businesses survive. And again, it's hard for the consumer to determine what's a big corporate chain owned by some tobacco company or what's a locally owned business by a mom and pop team who have been hanging on by their fingernails trying to survive. And that's our goal through the cannabisculturecollection.com. That's our goal, is to have a giant list of all the farms that deserve support, all the stores that deserve support, and help this part of the industry stay strong while we're shaking out 6 or 7 years after legalization came into effect. So a big part of that, though, back to our roots of cannabis culture, is, you could just sell weed and make money. A lot of people are doing that, but I'm not a salesperson, and I'm more of an activist. And right now, we still have a lot of issues with legalization in Canada, in the US, all around the world. We're seeing a lot of problems that still need to be addressed. Taxation, licensing barriers, medical access, even just packaging. The fact, like, this is ridiculous. This bag of packaging, and you see the litter everywhere. It'd be nice to have deli style cannabis again, like the old dispensary days where you can smell the jar, the nose knows. We have to have that ability to connect with the cannabis itself in person. So whether you're concerned about advertising restrictions, tourism, lounges, it's crazy we don't have lounges. It's insane that we still have, like, I've got a big criminal record that prevents me from actually owning any businesses. So the goal of all this is just letting the cannabis culture brand has 30 years of history, letting the brand highlight the people, the producers, and the stores who are doing the hard work. And we're using all of this for something called Fair Cannabis. If you want to check out faircannabis.ca, it's a one-stop, nonpartisan resource hub. So there are petitions to members of parliament or local politicians. There are links to groups that are working in different areas, whether it has to do with medical or tourism or regulations, taxation reform. We want people to find those groups. How do you find the people who are doing the petitions or lobbying government or in court fighting for the rights of, for example, employees, drug testing? We actually helped bring some attention to a union employee who was getting fired for medical use, legal medical use, was going to lose their job because they tested after 30 days of use. Those are problems. And they went to the court, and after about 2 or 3 years, they won. And the company was ordered to, like, no, you can't fire people for legal medical use. So it's those sort of things we want to highlight. And by selling the good cannabis in our bag, we're going to use proceeds for Fair Cannabis to help fight for change where it needs to be done. So that's my spiel for now. That's only one part of it, the products and Fair Cannabis, but we did just open our first legal cannabis store in Niagara Falls under the Cannabis Culture name, and it's an independent business owned by some locals, and we're trying to highlight what they're doing there. And it's exciting because, as you may recall, back in 2017, I was arrested in Ontario, and police would be undercover at our store openings way back then. So now that we're legal, we had the mayor of Niagara Falls come and cut the green ribbon of our store and welcome us to the legal landscape. And again, it's for a bigger purpose. I don't just want to run stores or sell weed. That's never been my thing. But, when I go to sleep at night, a couple of years ago, I thought, wow, legalization happened and I don't know what I'm going to do with my life anymore. But then as I saw the problems that were still existing and I saw action taking place, I saw people actually getting regulatory reform, packaging changes, sampling changes. There are changes, but how do we take the consumers and the people who give a damn and connect them with the organizations and the brands that are really having an impact? That's what Fair Cannabis is all about. And so I'm excited to be launching this and maybe even expanding worldwide, because we know that in countries all over, the bad parts of legalization are being introduced. And maybe if we empower the people, we can help prevent the harms from happening and put in place better policies.
Well, wow, Jodie, that was a mouthful, and super appreciate you updating us. Super appreciate the work that you've done all of these years. It's definitely incredible. I think I definitely want to link you up with Selena Wong, who's doing a lot of veteran stuff in Canada. I think that you've got this giant activist heart and activism energy in you that you might feel a good result from also potentially figuring out some synergies with your new project and the veterans across Canada. Usually we have Etienne Fontaine in here, who's our big representative for veterans across the world. He's an amazing activist as well, and hopefully he'll pop in here later and share some conversation with us. A quick question I had in regards to how you guys are going about choosing the small farms. I mean, you're a smoker. You love smoking joints. I see you smoking joints all the time, and you got that look on your face like, I just love this joint. Obviously, you're a part of that choice. Did you create a little group? Did you get a little kind of board of like 3 or 4 people that are like, let's go out and try all the weed? How are you deciding on these farms?
Well, my team consists of myself and my 2 longtime business partners, Jeremiah and T, and they have been with me since I basically showed up. So we've got collectively, oh my gosh, dozens and dozens of years, decades of experience. So we have been reaching out to different farms and asking them to send us samples of what they have. So a number of the options that came through came from, like they would send us a bag of what they've got coming out. But with others, I actually just went and bought good weed based on what people online were saying. I saw a lot of the craft community or the legacy community was shouting out different brands and different growers. And I thought, okay, I actually have a list on my phone of farms to try. So whenever I would go to a store and see one of those brands, I'd buy it and try it out. So yeah, we did the smoking test. And of course, we get the certificates of analysis. So I mean, that's a whole other topic, maybe a big debate about whether these lab results are actually accurate or how it's being done and all that. And, a lot of people are looking for high THC stuff. That doesn't really matter. To me, it's about, again, the smell of it, the taste of it. And so we have on our website our standards and what we've done to set some sort of, standard for these brands to meet. So if you go to cannabisculturecollection.com, we're talking about obviously white ash. I mean, yeah, there are ways to get around creating white ash when it's not actually clean, but we make sure that it doesn't burn your throat. There's none of that terrible burning on your lips, that sort of weird, I think it's fertilizer. Again, I'm not a master grower or anything, but I would say I'm not really a connoisseur. I do love weed. I smoke it all, but my partners are much more attuned. I mean, they're the type of people, perhaps like everyone here, they can open a bag and smell it and go, that's got some of this terpene, or, oh, that leads towards this sort of thing. And I'm just like, I like the smell of it. I like the taste of it. But also looking at how they grow. I mean, we are not going to sell anything that's irradiated, for one. We're going to make sure that if we can to support organic. Some of these farms, they might not even be organic certified. But as we know, sometimes it's hard to even reach that threshold, and yet you're still using mountain water. You're using some sort of living soil, like you're doing things with your plants, no pesticides, just ladybugs or whatever it may be. That's what we're looking for, is these farms and these families who have been doing it for generations. And, I even just went to an AR Cannabis Cup the other night, and there's a couple there. They're this wonderful married couple, and they're so much fun. It's smoker brands. And they told me that they had gone to an event way long ago, back in the day. It was down in Vancouver, and you got a big bowl of weed. And I said, that was the Toker's Bowl. Yes.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, that's like saying a secret code word. I know you're legit because you were around 20 years ago. You've been around, you know what's what. So it's really also about the people. Like, honestly, it's word of mouth recommendation. And what I'm finding is a lot of these farms and stores and the people involved, we all know each other. We all go to the events together. But how do we branch out to the consumer? And there are different groups of consumers. There's a bunch of, well, I want to call them youngsters, but they are adults. They can, buy it legally. They're not kids, but they weren't there 20 years ago. They weren't, maybe they weren't even alive 20 years ago, because if they're 19 or 20, now they can go buy a bag. But these are consumers who, like many other industries and commodities, maybe they're looking for something more organic and local and decentralized. A lot of people do that when they're shopping for groceries at farmers markets or going to a thrift store or supporting a local artisan. That's something that exists in many different areas, and there's no reason why cannabis should be any different. And I believe there are ethical consumers out there seeking or trying to find the good stuff. But how do you educate them in the stores? Again, the packages all look the same. You got that THC logo, you got the yellow warning, you've got a brand, and you've got a label. But when consumers go and try and find what's good, How do we get into the store? How do we get beyond a bud tender recommendation, which sometimes is just designed to clear out the old stuff, you know? So about the consumers and making sure we listen to them and what they want. And that includes low THC consumers. I mean, we talk a lot about people who want to quit smoking, for example, but they don't want to get just blasted all day on a heavy hitter gas duty, you know? How do we provide products for everybody? And I've even ventured into edibles myself. I had a little bit of a tooth situation and couldn't smoke for a few days. So I was like, wow, now I'm going to have to try edibles. And that's an interesting experience too. There's cookies, there's chocolate, there's soy sauce for food. I mean, it's wild. So I'm actually on a learning journey myself. And I, like you said, I have an activist heart, but I think what's most exciting right now is I get to go from having spoken about things I knew about to learning from all the other people. Like now is a great time for me to just shut up and listen. I mean, not at this moment, but you know, when I'm at these events, I'm listening to what's going on, and my mind is being blown by all sorts of things. Like I was skeptical of drinks for a while. And then I think that was the last time I was on Hash Church. You actually had someone speaking about how drinks, I think it's nano emulsification or something like that, to allow for faster onset. So I'm learning a lot, and I just want to bring people along with the cannabis culture brand. Again, we've got like 31 years of history and almost 3 million followers on our social media. Like we've got all sorts of outreach, and yet I need something to tell those people. And that's why we're on this quest for quality. And that's part of this exciting new era for cannabis culture in the legal space.
Well, I'm sure you probably already have these, but Shay from Rosebud Farms, Kevin from Kootenai's Finest, and who was the third one? Oh, Ty from Woody Nelson. He grows for High Fidelity for Caitlin's resin brand.
Right, continue there. I've got basically those are all in this bag. So one of the problems was there's actually so many good products out there. It was hard to narrow it down to just three, but that's why our goal is the next round we'll do three more farms. Maybe it'll be Pineapple Buds and Woody Nelson and Rocky Mountain Cannabis, or oh my gosh, there's so many Valhalla flower, lots of different companies. So yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing from people too. Recommend to me the brands and the growers and the people who have the spirit in them that they care about this plant, because again, it's like any other product. When you actually love it, care for it, that comes through. It's like just like creating artwork. When you're an artisan and you put that in, people feel it. That energy, that vibration comes through the product. And that's why factory farm pesticide irradiated weed is such a shitty thing to smoke, because you can feel that in it.
Yeah, you should hook up with Mark and Dennis as well from Craft Greenery. They're one of our sponsors here on Hash Church. They got a little store on, I think it's on Kingsway. It's terrible, craftgreenery.com. But they have been spending a lot of time really focusing on exactly what you're talking about. And they would definitely be more than happy to pass on, all those great farms that they've been having, good luck with. Good results.
And that's the goal, is to go visit all these stores in person and see what they're up to. I mean, I want to thank Avenue Cannabis in West Vancouver and Sunrise Cannabis out on Kingsway. Those are my two that I've gone to the most, and they work very hard to highlight the local growers. And of course, there's Weeds with Don and Carol and so many others. But that's the goal, is that when you go to our websites or our social media, you'll be able to find a list of resources of who deserves support, who are the real genuine people. And that's not to say that, some of these stores that are big corporate chains like Spirit,
big backwoods.
They've got good people in them. They've got good human beings behind the counter doing their best to educate consumers and highlight the finest in flower. And maybe they work for a big corporation. And to that end, that's why Fair Cannabis, the goal is not to just say, screw big corporate, this is only for the little guy. Because no, we have to do what others do. You get these giant corporations to give you money and resources to fight for better advertising regulations. They want that. Get rid of these crazy taxes. Big corporate wants that. And even again, with the drinks, it's like, well, maybe it's better that big alcohol, big tobacco, and big pharma come into the cannabis space, because at least they'll be selling something that's better for people than the products they're selling usually. So, hey, come on board, discover the magic of cannabis and help us promote it. So that's part of the goal too, is we're not just saying these big, powerful players don't have a space, but it's kind of like a Robin Hood thing, I guess, take the money from the big guys and fight for something that benefits them, but also benefits the smaller people as well. So.
It's a very smart way of doing it. It was, I've spoken about Allison Gordon before. She was the CEO for 48 North. And prior to that, she started a little activism breast cancer thing called Rethink Breast Cancer with her partner, MJ Dakota. And MJ and Allison basically figured out that they were going to do events that were going to benefit and educate women. So it was basically like, breast cancer is outdated. It's all for like older women. It's not set up for a younger woman who just finished university, maybe just had her first child, it was all set up for these older women. And they were like, how can we educate and feed this important information to these young girls who are now showing up with these breast cancers in all different aspects of their life? And they did exactly what you just said. They went to large pharmaceutical companies. They said, you're going to fund this, and we're not going to tell anyone you funded it. We're not going to promote your drugs or your company. And that's what's going to happen. And they basically got those companies to give them money, and they would do these events where I was able to go and speak one time at one of the events with a bunch of different doctors and 200 plus breast cancer patients sitting in the audience. Like it was, and really what I felt like what they were really there for was hope. And that's what Allison and MJ Dakota were doing. They were creating hope for these women, and they were getting pharmaceutical companies to fund that hope. So you nailed what you just said there, Jodie. There's real importance in that. And people may have heard that and thought, what? Why would we go to those evil It's like, no, that's exactly what you do. You get those companies to fund certain levels of activism because, they need to be doing that.
Absolutely. And they have the resources, and they can also be educated too. I think one of the most exciting things is, throughout the earlier years of legalization, you have people entering the cannabis space from other big business entities, and they were touched by the magic of this plant. They actually have gone through their own reformation and learning experience. And an example would be Aurora Cannabis. Started out small by a guy named Terry Booth, who hung out at our vapor lounge and said, I got to get into this weed space. And
what a maniac.
he like asked me what he should name his company and stuff. And like, so they just went off and did their own thing. And then later on, I was on a radio show with Cam Batley, who represented them, and we were supposed to be debating, but we ended up really finding a lot of common ground. And he became one of the best supporters I've got, because we launched Cannabis Amnesty. It was this effort with lawyers and political people to fight for a pardons process in Canada so we could get rid of at least the possession charges people had. One day, us big traffickers like me will get our pardon too, but we were fighting for amnesty, and Aurora Cannabis gave $50,000 to Cannabis Amnesty. And then Cannabis Amnesty got the NDP political party to introduce legislation in Parliament to give pardons, and it passed. And it's a bit of a flawed pardons system, to be fair, but it happened. And Aurora Cannabis gave money to that. So that's where I see it's possible to have these larger groups help support the efforts that ultimately do benefit them as well in the end. So yeah, that's exciting to be able to be launching this and connect with all these different groups who can contribute.
Awesome. Well, welcome to Etienne Fontaine. He must have heard you talking about activism and his ears were burning. Now he's lighting up a big fatty, and he's ready to join us on Hash Church.
Get all fired up.
Yes. Yeah, get all fired up.
Gotta be fired up. How's it going, everybody?
Going good, brother. Going good. Jodie was just giving us the lowdown on some of what she's doing here recently, and it all sounds really good. I mean, cannabis culture has a real historical place in Canada. And when I saw you guys doing the stores initially, I thought, oh my God, these are the perfect stores. Like, it was a no-brainer that those would be some of the most popular stores in Canada, and you guys were crushing it. You just were doing it in a way that was like, uh-oh, these guys are gonna get in trouble.
Oh, it's basically one of the easiest law enforcement investigations ever because the disclosure was basically, well, here's Jodie going to the store and saying she's breaking the law to demonstrate the law is unjust and openly breaking the law. So there's our evidence. So ultimately, they were able to come at me with conspiracy charges because also in their investigation, they noted we never find her selling weed or buying weed because I didn't actually buy or sell any of the product. I was being a spokesperson for the effort that we were doing. It was basically to say, I mean, this was looking back at 2016 when legalization was going to be coming into force and all of the talk about how it would be done was taking place. At the very same time, all of these unlicensed dispensaries were everywhere and they were medical mostly. Admittedly, some, had a doctor on Zoom who could confirm your glaucoma and get you into that store. But when we opened up the cannabis culture stores, the goal was to demonstrate what legalization should look like. Adult use stores. You don't have to lie about being sick. You don't have to wait until you have cancer. You can come in as a grown adult and access cannabis for whatever your personal reasons are. Preventative health, even. A safer alternative to opioids or alcohol. Whatever it is, you're an adult, you get to come in and shop. So yes, we did open up these stores to illustrate what we thought legalization should look like because at the very same time, Uber and Airbnb were both operating in Canada and they were not legal. There were no regulations. They were entirely self-regulated, presenting their model and saying, hey, we're doing this, we're self-regulating. How about you, government, work with us to figure out how to make this all legit? And the government said, okay, Airbnb, let's work with you. Uber, yeah, we'll work with you. Dispensaries that are self-regulating and lab testing and responsibly providing cannabis by checking ID, no. You're still criminals. You're not going to be allowed to exist. Sorry, it's going to be our friends, the cops and corporations who get to open up shop first. That was part of what infuriated me, obviously. And yeah, I did boldly go out there because, it is a risky business. And the day before we opened our first unlicensed store in Toronto, the day before, May 26th, there was a giant raid of over 200 dispensaries in Toronto, right on the heels of all this public polling that showed nobody wanted them to be raided and shut down. I mean, the government, the police, they were wasting millions of dollars going after peaceful, nonviolent people who were begging to be taken seriously and treated legitimately. And yet they were wasting tons of money going after them. So I think it was Matt Barron and myself were at the police press conference the following day at the headquarters in Toronto and went in and the cops had all this, well, it looked like a dispensary. They had all these wonderful products lined up, shelves and stacks of flower and extracts and going on and on about how it was a threat to public safety and all this. And I accidentally took over the press conference because people were allowed to ask questions. So I asked questions and maybe made a few statements also, but it was upsetting to them. And then the investigation into our stores began the next day. Again, not hard to find us when I'm holding a press conference telling everyone we're breaking the law, we're using civil disobedience, we're openly breaking laws that are unjust to demonstrate that the laws cause more harm than the substance itself. And I was ready to accept the punishments, and here I am. I think I ended up with a plea deal for quite a large financial fee and money laundering and trafficking over 3 kilos. Again, even though they said I never trafficked, but better than conspiracy where you're facing 30 years. So
yeah, well, they listen, that charge you got, trafficking over 3 kilos, I have the same one. And when I got that in 98, it had a maximum fine of 25 years in prison. That's what the on paper. So when we did legalization, you'll probably remember they changed that to 14 years. And people were like, 14 years? That's crazy. And I think people didn't realize that it used to be 25 years. And that's the only reason the judge in my case wouldn't wipe my record. I wouldn't have gotten a record. But when they hit you with that 3 kilo one, No judge can wipe it. No judge can say, you know what, I think this is wrong. He's handcuffed, or she, into giving you a felony record. And that's basically how I ended up with one as well.
Right. And even the people involved, I mean, our prosecutor, after we did our plea deal and sentencing, she came up to us and said, like, I sincerely hope like things go well for you in the future. Like, she wasn't, these are people, let me go back. Back when Mark, my ex-husband, Mark Emery, was arrested by the DEA, and his prosecutor in Washington State was John McKay. And he came up to Canada. We actually first met in the Washington State legislature, where we were both testifying in favor of legalization. And then he came up to Canada for a press conference with me and our former Attorney General and Dr. Evan Wood. We were doing something called Stop the Violence BC. And yeah, Mark was in prison in the United States, and his prosecutor was sitting beside me. And the press, we had a press conference, and they were saying, how can you possibly sit together, even though you're both calling for legalization and he's using, like, how? And I said, and it's still true, it's the law that's forcing these good people to do bad things. The law is requiring some of these prosecutors and lawyers and judges, they don't believe in these laws, perhaps, but they are still required to follow them. That's their job. So what we need to do is change the law so that we can protect them from having to do these bad things. And that's still true to this day. I mean, we talk a lot about evil cops and this and that, but the truth is, like, it is not easy to be a police officer. And when I'm in danger, or I feel like I'm in danger and something violent or terrible is happening, I want to be able to call the police and not be afraid. So we need to support the cops in that way. That's what law enforcement against prohibition was all about. It was basically all these police saying, you're putting us all in danger. Prohibition is a problem. It's not the cops, it's the prohibition. But I will agree, yes, there are definitely bad cops. There's always going to be abuse of authority when you have people given that sort of power. But the same could be said for a tyrannical boss at a grocery store. You know, the same could be said for a lot of people out there in the world. There's good and there's bad, and you just got to try to align with all the good people you can and try and help the people who are not so, positive. Try and help them see the light. And again, that's the magic of cannabis. That's what I love so much about it, is seeing how, you mentioned veterans, and you mentioned like people who have gone through horrific things and they never would have considered cannabis. And then they hear somebody talking about how it helped get rid of their night terrors. It helps them get through the evenings. It helps them at least cope with what they're dealing with. And that's the magic of this plant. Like, I am a cannabis evangelist. I do believe it's a miracle medicine. It is helping my own family members and people I love get through very difficult illnesses and hard times. So that's why I'm still here. I mean, we're not giving cannabis over to big corporate and to malicious people and profiteers. We still have the power to, bring this plant to help convert these people. That's really the exciting thing I see. This is a plant that grows through concrete. It grows in the wildest conditions. It's meant to survive. And if it survived prohibition, it can survive legalization and overregulation. It's just on us to do the work to chip away at these unnecessary taxes and everything. I mean, I'll stop rambling, but I just want to say one last thing, is that these tax stamps are nonsense. This excise stamp that we have in Canada, this crippling fee, is insane, because this very same product is being grown in the same facility and shipped through a Health Canada medical cannabis program to medical patients who can sometimes have it subsidized and covered. And yet at the same time, the government is saying we have to give it a tax equal to tobacco and equal to alcohol. These harmful, deadly substances that cause incredible devastation. Can also be fun to have some tequila or wine once in a while, but these taxes should not be on a product that's actually medicine. So that's one of our main goals, is to try and tackle that. But we'll see how the government likes the idea of giving up that cash cow.
The taxes too, like you spoke, for tobacco and alcohol, those are supposed to be taxes that help pay for the tear on the social fabric that those products bring to us, the enormous weight of for alcohol, it's probably policing. It's like my mother, who worked at 911, said it's around 85 to 90% of calls are alcohol related. And then you have the hospitals, and you have just this enormous cost from those drugs. So it makes sense. It's like, of course, you're going to have high taxes on those drugs. But to have cannabis, which is actually considered a medicine in our country, for them to just flip that and be like, well, this is a medicine, absolutely, but it's also a recreational drug. So we're going to have to tax the shit out of it. I saw Gord from a company in Saskatchewan recently posting a piece of his hash, and he said it was a 58.9% excise tax on this hash. And he was just like, man, he's like, I'm just trying to make a few bucks here and get product out to the people. But, and there's another weird thing, Jodie, that I'm sure and Hillary Black would be another great person to ask this question, because we have, and even when the other gentleman was talking about his extremely expensive, beautifully grown sweet skunk and other cultivars, you see people in the chat right away like, well, those aren't patient. And they start pulling. There's this energy in cannabis where you have to grow it to perfection and give it to everyone. And then there's this other energy where if you sell cannabis, you're like an evil corporate douche nozzle. And I just wonder, how hard is that for you to navigate?
Oh, definitely hard. I mean, I was one of the most vocal critics of legalization for years. I remember we went to the Supreme Court of Canada to try and prevent cannabis from being controlled by provincial alcohol monopolies. There was an alcohol case to try and get rid of these provincial barriers. Anyway, we were at the party with lawyers and media beforehand, the night before, and I got to meet one of the journalists that I interacted with on Twitter a lot. And we had a pleasant conversation, and he said, I didn't think you'd be so friendly because the way you tweet, you're always so upset. And I said, yeah, I am upset. And there's a lot of all caps energy in those comments because I was so furious at the way that the government was looking to continue criminalizing people and restricting it. And so I spent a few years just not really on the scene. There was a pandemic in there that everybody kind of got sidelined for a while, but spent a couple of years just sitting back waiting, because a lot of the people who heard my criticism said, it's only just been legalized. Like, stop complaining. Like, maybe it won't be so bad. Like, wait and see. So I said, okay, we'll wait and see. And then 5 years later, I'm like, okay, so we waited and we've seen, and a lot of our concerns were legit, but there's still positivity. So cannabis culture, quote unquote, going legal, you can imagine there are some critics of that. It's like, Jodie, you were the biggest opponent. How are you just flipping over and selling corporate weed? And I said, well, no, if I just wanted to flip over and sell corporate weed, trust me, I got a few offers to take a lot of money to shut my mouth a few years ago and just help promote some products and brands. Not a chance I would do that. So going legal for me was about waiting and seeing what could we do in this space. We're not going to be the first legal stores. We're not going to be the first licensed producers. That's not even in my interest. But the perfect time is right now, because we are at that interesting stage where, there are a lot of small scale farms that have been hanging on for dear life for a few years, and they need to be highlighted. They need some support. And again, I don't know where consumers and people go to find a list of all these great farms and all these great stores. So for me, it's back to the advocacy and highlighting and using our megaphone and my all caps power, although I don't do that anymore, but using that energy to explain that if we don't, right now, if we do not support the independent operators, they will fall off and disappear. They will lose their opportunity, and it will only be corporate factory farm weeds. So I'll get a message from someone saying, oh, you sell out, you're just going to sell corporate irradiated weed. And I respond and say, absolutely not. That's not the goal. The goal is to support those who are growing clean, beautiful cannabis. But also, hey, if you're on a budget and all you can afford is big old bag of buds from a factory farm, that's okay too, because we shouldn't be telling people that they have to only spend top dollar to get quality or any medicine or access. So I try to explain that I'm not just selling out, because that could have been done years ago. we are using this perfect time when the rest of the world is looking at legalization and implementing their own laws. We need to be able to survive this massive corporatization or normalization, whatever you might want to call it, commodification, whatever it may be. We need to make sure that we keep the legacy, message, and spirit alive, especially when corporations and governments are looking at exclusive licensing and continued prohibition and arrests. That's happening worldwide. We need to make sure that there's not a cannabis colonialism reach around the world. We need to be sure to defend the indigenous and local growers and advocates in these different countries around the world. So that's the goal for us is, yeah, we're not just going legal just because we're going legal for a purpose, and that's to highlight those who deserve it. And it's honestly just brand licensing, but it's marketing and messaging and media. And that's what I'm hoping to do is speak to these issues every chance we get.
Well, I think you're the perfect person for it, Jodie. That is for sure. You definitely have a way of doing it. You have the history. You have, I remember when you rolled in so many years ago, I was like, who is this young girl in like high heel shoes and skirts and all professional? And just like, I remember how many people dismissed you. And you absolutely showed every single one of them by staying so consistent. By utterly listen, the stuff you dealt with Mark and visiting him in those prisons and all those stories you told to those families, that stuff was gut-wrenchingly unbelievable that you had to go. Nice to see you coming out the other side and having some forward and being able to have some branded.
Thank you. And also,
I say goodbye to my family.
I mean, also, I just want to shout out my normal life too. Quite admittedly, like you said, when you met me, I was 19. I spent all those years literally married to the mission to legalize cannabis. And then it happened, and I had a bit of an existential crisis. Like, wait a minute, who am I? What am I about? What do I like? And so, of course, I returned to going out into nature, cooking. I met an incredible man who I've been with for nearly 4 years, Jordan. He is just, I love him so much and he loves me so much. And it's like, wow, you can actually have relationships that are more authentic than just speaking through a megaphone and representing a cause. It's someone who has introduced me to doing activities like paddleboarding and returning to skiing, which I hadn't done since I was a kid. And so I've been able to take these last few years to not only find myself for who I am as a human being beyond my love for cannabis. But again, in that time, I kept thinking, wow, I really still care about what's going on. Like I'm not retiring. I can't just give up on weed and go do other stuff. Like that's not for me. That's not my fate. I speak to issues that I hear from other people. And I think that was the most important thing for me all those years was I mean, I never really talked about myself because there wasn't really much of a myself to talk about. I'm talking about the experiences of prohibition and prisons, and so that's what I'm aiming to do today is to continue being a voice for all the voiceless people, being, even the farmers. There are people who have to continue growing their plant and employing their staff and keeping the lights on and paying their bills, dealing with processors, dealing with all the struggles. And how are they possibly going to advocate and speak when they're just barely keeping things going as it is? So again, it's about let me know what the issues are. Let me know what you're working on. Let me know who's doing great stuff in this industry. Let me help highlight them, because if that's what I've got at my disposal, an audience and a voice, please let me use it to help benefit this whole landscape. That's what's so important to me. I think there's a real revolution coming, a return to individual personalized medicine. And that's where cannabis is so different than everything else. You can't just standardize it. It's not going to affect people the same way at the same dose, even the same plant. Two people can share a joint and one gets relaxed and one gets anxious. So the idea of cannabis is let's return to discovering what works for individual bodies and spirits. And that's like part of the path of cannabis. It's the emperor wears no clothes, it's screaming from the tops that this thing is not what we've been told. and it offers so much potential for everybody, not just personal health, but financial health through having business opportunities, and spiritual health through having that connection that makes our weed events so magical when you finally get to reunite with your tribe. So anyway, but I'm very excited about the future and have learned so much from so many others and have a lot of learning to do. So I respect all of the people who are still in this industry. A lot of people quit and moved on, and a lot of people have just passed on, you know. Time is flying short. Cherish your time now. A lot of our friends are medical consumers, and they are not here anymore because they were treating something that took them from us. So it's important to keep that voice alive and make sure the spirit carries through. So I'll do the best I can to that regard.
Well, you're doing a great job. There's no doubt about that. Shout out to Jordan. I saw a heaviness in your eyes when Mark finally got out of prison and legalization happened. And I saw this weight sitting on you, and I definitely saw it disappear when you met that guy. Obviously, I still haven't met him, but I've seen through your social media just this real glowing happiness that you've had. So that's awesome to see. I hope that you guys come to Lions Bay this year and paddleboard with me and my wife, Charlene. We can get you a parking pass so that you can park down at the beach and never have a worry of getting a ticket. And it's just a nice place. Lions Bay is a good spot. You can go over to Boyer. You can go up to, either side. And we'll have to make that happen this summer.
One of our first date was actually at Brunswick Beach. So I know your area. I know that hill. We don't
have took you to the nude beach, did he?
I took him. We met.
That's awesome.
All natural, and yeah, and it's been wonderful. And a lot of people don't really know also, he's got a kid. So I'm a stepmom now too, which is
amazing.
That's a whole nother experience. Like I'm living some normal life stuff, but I long for the adventure of being a radical activist, but following the rules and regulations, of course, but just pushing the envelope.
Yes, never stop with the civil disobedience. I've said it many times. I kind of feel, and maybe you might agree or disagree with this, but I kind of feel like, when legalization happened, so many people got licenses. So many people were like, well, I can't be an activist anymore. I just can't do this. And this activism just like dropped out the bottom, right? Like, didn't you see that happen?
Well, because they have licenses, and that's the hardest part is like when the government says, okay, come and apply for a license, and you get all your stuff lined up and you do all the things and you go and you get your permission, and the government says, here's your piece of paper, now you're allowed to do it and we won't come after you anymore. You better not criticize that government. You better not bend the rules. You better follow what they've told you to follow, or they are going to come and take away that special piece of paper, and then you'll be a criminal again. So that is not cool. And so I understand why a lot of people who got stores or farms up, they're like, I can't afford to criticize. I really can't. We'll get in so much trouble. And so that's again where I come in. I've got my big old criminal record, so I don't have a license to lose. So let me just speak freely on all of your behalf, because that's what I've always done anyway. So even though I'm not like breaking laws anymore, I can still speak as if I am breaking laws, I guess you could say. So yeah, I want to represent.
Yeah. Well, I love how you talk about your criminal record, your big old criminal record. I got a money laundering, I got a trafficking, I got
I always say I'm a convict with conviction.
Indeed you are. Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thank you for sharing with us as always, Jodie. It's great to hear, and anything that the Hash Church community can do to, support cannabis culture, go check them out. Is it true that you have who is it Brittany and Aaron that are helping you over there? Are they just doing some social media? Are they involved?
Well, so my co-accused with the cannabis culture stores that got raided in 2017, there was me and my ex Mark, and there was Aaron Goodwin and Chris Goodwin, married couple, longtime activist, and Brittany Guerra, longtime friend and CC alumni. And yes, Brittany is helping us with getting this store going because she wisely moved into the space a few years ago, and she's helped manage and open a number of stores and stayed true to her authentic heart. And Erin and Chris, they've got a kid together, and she's working her butt off, and she was going into legal stores and working and learning there too. So yeah, the two of them were there for our grand opening. Brittany is helping make sure it all takes off. We've got a 420 event happening with the Canadian Cannabis Tourism Alliance. So we're holding an event at the store with music and DJs and giveaways. You can win a trip to Thailand even. So all of that is on Cannabis Culture. If you go online, you can find our social media. But yeah, if you're interested in finding out about our mission with Cannabis Culture Collection, that's cannabisculturecollection.com. The retail stores can pre-order now. The first drop of this bag is coming in May, and it's a pretty little silver bag to highlight the beautiful stuff inside. And again, I'm just really excited to support the farms that deserve it, that work so hard. And even if you don't find our cannabis in your store, when you see those brands, you know that they're the real deal. Buy their stuff from government stores, from wherever, support them. And faircannabis.ca, that's the website to check out what we're aiming to expand on. Again, I'd love to see this go into the United States and elsewhere. There are issues of all kinds, so you can click on an issue, whether it's taxation, lounges, medical access, and the list goes on. We don't even have everything up yet because there are many different concerns that need some attention, but we're starting with a number of them where people can click on it, get some talking points, so that when you go meet your member of parliament or you go to a city council meeting, here are some talking points. Here are the basic outlines of the issue and how to fix it. And then there's an easy take action button. You just click that button, take action. It's an automated form. You can send letters to government officials. And so we're looking to connect with all sorts of organizations out there. If you know of a group or a brand or a person, a court case, anything, if you know of somebody working to make things better for legalization, let me know so we can highlight them, send people their way, get people to join their petition, join their organization. So yeah, our cannabis culture store is working with the Tourism Alliance because we need more tourism in Canada. We don't have enough promotion about this beautiful industry that has been here forever. So yeah, cannabisculturecollection.com and cannabisculture.com itself, and CC Niagara Falls. You can find that online. And we'll be doing more with Pot TV. I mean, I guess when I decided to take a bite in this new industry, I decided to stuff a whole mouthful because we've got a lot of stuff on our plate. But it's very exciting, and it all depends on the community and the people who we can connect with and help highlight. So send your recommendations my way, and we'll do everything we can to shine a light on those who deserve it.
Beautiful. Listen, I've been talking lots. Is there anyone else that has anything they want to chime in regards to all the things Jodie just said? I feel like I've been, just me and her in the conversation. So if there's anything from Dr. Allen or Dr. Mark or
I
Jay.
definitely resonated with the side of oh shit, I got all high over here.
Yeah, you smoking
No,
that good shit.
one thing you were saying about not one thing works for you and not the other person. That was a big thing because, as somebody who kind of like people ask a lot, like, what do I recommend, this and that, and it's like I smoke during the day and like I use it to I almost don't smoke at night exclusively. I don't use it for bed, so like it's gonna be a little bit different for me and. Yeah, that's just a crucial one because I feel like people do go to dispensaries and they go, I need this for this. And they're like, here you go. This is like the one. And it's like maybe relatively placebo, but it is all about like proper access to stuff.
Absolutely. The experience that we used to have in dispensaries where you could smell the jar, look at the flower. I mean,
Yeah.
people, ultimately, you can tell pretty quick if you're a consumer. You can tell by smelling it whether it's going to set you off on an anxiety attack or help you chill out. Like some people cannot handle the heavy, gassy stuff. They need a tangy, citrusy something. So,
And even some of the strange regulations were like, I don't know if you guys went to a dispensary in California, but it's like in a little box with holes in it, and you just kind of like sniff it, and it's like totally aerated. I don't know. I feel like it's weird that they don't just let you because they're already wasting a gram or an eighth or whatever it is. It's strange they don't just let you smell a jar, just like a more normal experience would be, grabbing anything.
Ultimately, cannabis should be sold like they sell stuff in farmers markets. You can go to a farmers market and you can find meat, you can find eggs, you can find veggies grown in actual shit like manure. You can find all sorts of stuff and it's just laid out there. And these farmers are self-regulating. They want you to come back next week and buy another carton of eggs. They want you to get
On that comment, I would be fine if we did have a farmers market style thing and there was random testing and it was a really high caliber, really like controlled pesticides, and not only pesticides, but excess nutrients, because that's something that when I went to, I was in Zurich, and they're launching a program where you don't, and this is something else you kind of mentioned, like you don't have to be ill to enjoy cannabis. You can just want to do it because you don't want to drink or whatever, reason you want to do it for. And preventative, big time. Like I had a friend who got in a car accident and he wanted a bunch of third eye, made a bunch of third eye into an edible form. It was like probably the most powerful edible the last couple of years has been made, but it was ridiculous. And it was like an opiate, literally, and it kept him from taking any of the medication the doctors gave him for his car accident. He just ate this brownie over the week, and the inflammation went down.
Sorry to
and-
interrupt. Is someone playing music? Because the music, we can't have music in the background. I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
whoever's playing music, you have to stop it. It'll strike my channel with a copyright. So even if it's small music in the background, it has to be off. Sorry, go ahead.
The oh man,
I know, I'm sorry. I
No,
tried,
you're
I was
good,
like, I
you're
don't
good,
want to
you're good.
interrupt. I don't want to interrupt. And I was like, oh my
You're
God, this
good.
music is gonna,
Well,
can't have music
No,
on the
you're good, you're
YouTube
good, my bad.
channel.
in California, you actually can go to farmers markets. There, I think you're allowed up to 8 during the year. So those things are starting to change. But of course, Jody, you're absolutely right. We have to have better education. I've been a provider in California for now and going into my 26th year. And yeah, the frustrations that you're speaking out and toward are what we're dealing with. The same in California is we're dealing with a lot of corporate cannabis that has come in, including Canadian companies who have bought a lot of California dispensaries. And yeah, it's very challenging for mom and pop stores like myself to, make people aware that one, we're still around and we're even on the cannabis trail, and there's still its own set of challenges because the quality has gone down. We can't smell or see the cannabis like we used to, which when I went up to Canada this year, I saw that, you can no longer even look at the cannabis. So it was rather surprising to see the demographic shifts that were culturally significant to selecting cannabis be absolutely stricken by the legal market, which, yeah, we have to find a way around that because people need to physically see cannabis. Canadians like Californians are a little higher educated on the cannabis scale, so we want to see how fresh it is. We want to see how swollen the brackets are. We want to see if there's more red hairs than there's bracts and things like that that help us understand the visual quality that is there. Because yeah, it is definitely suffering under the corporate mass production that is providing us with over oxygenated cannabis that, as I equate it to, the light and oxygen, just absolutely destroying it. And because there's so much sitting around, it's just literally degrading on the shelves. So we have to have a shift of understanding about, as we've talked many times about cold storage from beginning to end, because the quality is gone away, and the quality of the cannabis that I saw in Canada has definitely gone down from when I went and saw you and Mark at your spot back in the day in Vancouver. It's a stark change in difference, and I'm not sure how you navigate those waters besides what you're doing through education, making people aware, and pointing out the obvious to people.
Well, and it's also a challenge because of, these high quality growers. There are a lot of costs involved. Like this is not a high profit margin industry by any means, not like the old days. And so, they have to charge a premium. Like some of the stuff that we're looking at is more expensive. But to the topic beforehand where you lost track with your lovely cactus glass piece. I love that piece of glass there. But you're talking actually about harm reduction.
Yeah,
And
actually, yeah, go ahead.
drug addiction and people who are using cannabis as substitution therapy, they're using it to get off of the prescription painkillers from their work accident or off of the fentanyl that they don't wish to be addicted to, but they're scrounging in the downtown east side and living a life of misery. I mean, there are people who can get off of these hard drugs by using cannabis. So we have this strange thing to the topic of the medical use and why is it taxed with a sin tax when it's medicine. This is something the governments and the whole system can't really figure out how to deal with. It's like it doesn't fit into neat little boxes. And we do need to have high quality cannabis at a high price point for those who desire and can afford to do it. I mean, those stores that you mentioned, we had $7 strains and $14 strains for the same gram, double the price. And some people would come in and they don't even care about the name of it. They would tell us, sell me the most expensive, because people mentally equate high cost with quality, which in some cases is true. But there are people who simply cannot afford that. And that goes to those who are medical, disabled, on welfare, on assistance, trying to get off of a drug they do not wish to use anymore. And we need to be able to find a way to provide medical substitution access that's affordable and yet be able to keep a high enough price point for these farms to be able to make money. There's a great documentary about California, and I'm so sorry I don't remember the name. It was recently done. It was about Humboldt and the Golden Triangle, and the Emerald
Yeah,
Triangle.
Johnny from Huckleberry Farms is on there, right?
I think so. And it was devastating because they went from illegal to legal, and they're like, we cannot afford this. Like going legal is actually just a suicide mission. You're not able to afford to exist in this industry. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around that too. As we find these farms and we put them in our bag, we're still offering them a price that is generous enough for them. We're not looking to just, sell it to us cheap, because what are you going to do otherwise? I mean, it's a very interesting range between high-end quality recreational social use cannabis for those who want to enjoy that and the absolute most affordable, grow it in your backyard for next to nothing cannabis that is still medicine. I mean, even Mexican brickweed and swag, that's still medicine. Go back 15 years ago, the parents giving kids epilepsy medicine for their seizures, that's just stuff being grown in a bucket in the backyard. I mean, we don't need to have extremely sterile, stringent regulations, but that does work too. So cannabis is just such a disruptor. And I think that's what's so hard for governments to deal with, is that you can't just set a percentage point. Like, is every bud going to be 27.5% THC? No. Like you take that top bud, I'm pretty sure it'll test differently than the little popcorn at the bottom of the plant. But so it's an interesting plant because it just says, do not restrict me, do not define me, do not constrain me to numbers and borders and regulations, because this plant is about what humans have always been about. No tomato is the same, no water source is the same. Everything is different, and you just have to find what works for you. And that's hard to regulate. That's about self-regulation.
One thing I was
Yes, so
getting on.
Colin, oh, sorry, go ahead. Colin had his hand up first, but you go ahead.
Oh, I'm
Then
sorry.
Colin,
I
and
didn't know
then
that
that's
was
okay.
enough let me go that
Well, I'm on a shitty laptop computer. Usually I'm wicked fast and I got my mute button and I'm doing, but this computer, none of the screens fit on my screen. So they're all out of the screen. So I got to move it and drag it. There was someone else that had their hand up right after Colin as well, but I can't see it anymore. Go ahead.
Have it.
Okay.
Well, so Jody, I think to kind of jump in on what you were saying, it's what I hear you saying is access points, right? Through price point is really what drives a lot of these isms that you're talking about. And then through that journey, price point continues to reign kind of the first thing that, you know, that they're looking for in terms of that particular person. And then you have the other type of person who has developed their palate, and they're now at the back of the menu, if you will. It was like a saying that we used to say in the States is most people don't get to the back of the menu because they it's too expensive, right? That's where the best hash is. That's where the best flour is usually. Um, you know, in terms of the bodega style, to kind of jump in on that a little bit, you know, in the States, we had that. Like when it first all happened, we had this beautiful opportunity to show the consumer, you know, through olfactory and sensory that this was either good, bad, or however it spoke to you, you know. And then we went to the CPG model where everything is consumer packaged goods and it's in a jar and it's labeled up and in a mylar, and people are now built on the trust of me telling you through words how great something is and then saying, hey, look at these numbers, this amounts to something great. And that's problematic for so many reasons, you know, as you kind of said, so many different ways, you know. And it's hard to kind of put that into a bottle, you know, and just say, hey, this is gonna work, you know. And as you know, Smoke More Hash pointed out earlier, when someone recognize like ask me, hey, what do I need? Well, that's a huge, that's like unveiling a whole conversation that it could take hours, years, months, you know, to get to that thing that they actually need. So yeah, I think you're right that there's a lot of work to do in terms of how we talk about things on a vernacular and what that terminology is.
Mhm.
How we better articulate that to the consumers, I think, is a constant journey. You know, we're still stuck in the bucket system that's factually wrong. And, you know, we all have to come together. I mean, I get asked all the time about my brand, why do terps matter? Well, because to me, they're the most important aspect of the experience, right? You know, in New York, where our brand is, it's really interesting because, you know, we're allowed to do these farmers markets. Like I can actually do a farmers market on my property, right? But I can't let them smell the herb. It's still a consumer packaged goods moment, right? And it's interesting because they give us little things, right? They give us little bits and pieces of the picture, but they don't give us everything that you've kind of, you know, said here. It's tough. It's not an easy thing. And coming from the traditional market, like a lot of us here, um, you know, I had to learn how to adapt, you know, over I guess 15 years of being in this now, you know, on commercially, and it's like it's just tough. It's really hard to know market to market, you know, how to really react to what goes around you, it goes on around you from a compliance point of view, because it's constantly evolving and changing, and you have so many forces outside of even the four walls within that particular market that are influencing that. I mean, Dr. Mark talks about it all the time with THCA, and you know, it's just there's a lot of pressure, you know, that there's no release on, you know, and it's hard, you know, but I think we all seemingly are here for the reasons to push this thing forward to better understand the world in which we occupy. And that's at the end of the day, as much as I want for our industry, it's kind of where we're at. We're just trying to understand this and push it forward in the best way possible. You know,
A strange plant because you mentioned terpenes, and I'm going to admit, like, I don't really know much about that. And when I get a package and it has all these words on it of limonene and this and that, I consider myself pretty deep in the cannabis industry, and yet I don't know any of that yet. And so sometimes we can be working with people who are so well informed about an area of cannabis that we forget many of the consumers. They haven't even moved past sativa, hybrid, indica, like THC percentage level. And then there's the evolving personal response to cannabis as well. You know, I find as I'm getting older,
yeah.
I used to smoke, you know, Mark said, I was hitting big 4 foot bongs all day long. I cannot do that for the life of me now. I used to smoke 5 joints a day even a couple years ago. And I was like maybe one or
Yeah.
two or something. So the consumers are different who we speak to. How do you educate them that I don't even, is it called a strain? I'm using the word strain. Is it actually cultivar? I don't know.
Ryan Lee wants you to use cultivar for sure.
Me too. Yeah, try to use that as much thought. But yeah, and most people, to take words out of Marcus's playbook, it's like most people have a lighter, right? And he's always said this to me through like the most every time I've ever, we talk a lot, and Marcus, you always say this, like most people just have a lighter, and you're so right. And as experienced as everyone is, Jody, you just said it, I've done studies on this because I tried to understand why percentage point mattered to humans so much, and because it was through their own experience that they thought this, right? But it's only based on paperwork. They don't really let their olfactory kind of speak so much, it seems, if you really look at the data on it. It's fascinating until you actually get them into a room and you say, hey, try this and then try that and make them choose. It's you know, THC percentage is kind of a really broad conversation. It really gets in the weeds. We get that asked all the time. Like, I'm looking for 31% or whatever, and they just, they're not. I don't know if they really know what they're asking, because there's not a great vernacular to even, or terminology to really describe what they're after.
Well,
You
there's also
know?
people who don't want high THC. Like they just
Yeah.
when I have been to Jamaica or so, you smoke joint after joint after joint, and you just feel this pleasant sort of, man, I'm smoking all day, but I'm not blasted out of my mind, because sometimes
Sure.
if some people want to be super duper heavy baked all day long, and that's totally cool. I get it. But yeah, even just educating people, like there's more than just THC percentage here. And it would be amazing to have more understanding of the terpenes. Like, I want to learn from you right now more about it, to help me educate myself. But what is it about a certain strain when you smell it and it speaks to you and you're like, oh yeah, this is like that stuff I love. I know I love this. You don't even need the name of it to know through the smell, and that's the terpene experience. And I guess that's part of the entourage effect too, is that it's actually affecting how you feel, the smells and the oils that aren't even related to the cannabinoids. So
Well, it's like food. When you smell an amazing dish of food and your mouth starts watering, it's like, of course, that's a part of the experience. Like, okay, sometimes food is trippy, much the way cannabis is. Sometimes food, like the durian, smells a soap-based diaper. And yet people absolutely love the taste of it. It just has a off smell. So it's definitely like, there's no doubt about it that the olfactory feeds into desire. We know what we like the smell of. Oh, how's that?
oh well, you were making me think of smelling weed, and I'm like, I actually have, this is Afghani Bull Rider from Jeff Tech.
Oh, candy.
Yeah.
Oh
That's,
my God.
we should hook up at Lions Bay. Ride some
The
bull.
Afghan bull rider. Yeah, that's a candy cultivar for sure. I remember we got that from Jeff years ago, and Black Paw was growing it for the BC Compassion Club at his grow there. It is, and you know what? Shout out to Raz too, because Raz was a part of that. Raz used to be Jeff's roommate.
Awesome. That's right. You're back.
And Raz was the guy that knew the bull rider guys in San Diego. So he got the bull rider cut, got it to Jeff. Jeff crossed it with an Afghan, and we have the Afghan bull rider. People really don't know how good that jar of bud smells. It's very unique. And Michelle in the grow.
Yeah, that's the bull rider right there. That's this is it. We've covered this stuff for years, and beautiful old centerfolds. Remember print magazine days when you used to,
Oh my God! Listen, I loved print magazine days. I really, really did.
right? So yeah, there's a lot of history, and I think that's also part of the fun that people in our group get to experience, is all these youngsters entering into the cannabis field, and there's such a rich history to share with them. There are so many people they should know about. I mean, people like, Dave Skunkman, I rest in peace, right? I mean, he was here in the last time I was here. And so you've got these pioneers and these stories that are going to be so exciting to all the people who are entering into this field to look back. It's kind of like looking at hip hop history. Who were the actual artists who first took those machine, I'm not going to pretend I know what I'm talking about, but that we all,
It's a good metaphor, nonetheless.
yeah, right? But Etienne, I think I have to
Totally.
see a hand.
I was going to speak to what you were talking about earlier, Jody, about giving away free cannabis, because that's something we've done for the past 26 years. And that was a bit of a challenge because we literally had to, well, originally in the spirit of the law of California, it's to be able to give away free cannabis. We had to change the law to allow for dispensaries in themselves. But originally, when people came and said they had a medical need, we just gave them a certain amount of people who, you know, we just gave them cannabis. But what happened is other dispensaries did the same in the Bay Area, and we all did it on Tuesdays. So it was Compassion Tuesdays. And what happened is people realized this and just said, "Oh, I'm really sick and can't afford it." And they were basically going around all the dispensaries and getting all kinds of free cannabis and then selling it. And that was, of course, we realized, okay, we have to come up with a better way. So we had social services people, and they showed us the formula for how California comes up with their low income standards. Okay. Because again, you never know. Hi, congratulations. You just found out you got scheduled for cancer, and now I have to go find cannabis. Right. And so we used social worker to give that status. And then we continued to give away free cannabis, usually an eighth of cannabis a week to the individual, or then some people had dietary needs, so it became, food stuff, etc. So unfortunately, when the law changed for Prop 64 in 2016, they did not allow for compassionate giving. So we initially kind of just bought the cannabis again and just gave it away for free to those people who were really ill and met the low income standards. And we had to change the law at the state level. So we had to go to the state of California and ask them to allow us to give away cannabis for free, tax free. And that took some convincing, and multiple organizations came together for that. And we were able to create SB 34, which became the standard for able to give away free cannabis. Now, we had hoped other states would see what we were doing in California and follow suit on this. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. And the law sunsets this year, and so we lobbied last year and into this year for what is now Assembly Bill 2555, which is now the next law for the next 5 years, for us to still give away, charitably give away cannabis for free, because, as you stated, it's still very expensive. And I understand what you're saying about Mexican quality and south of the border quality of cannabis is still medicine. However, for our seriously ill patients, some of that stuff is dangerous. So we try to make sure they do have access to quality, as well as all of our cannabis is tested here in California. So, which was part of the law. So we are happy to have that, but unfortunately, there's not many other states that have followed suit. So if those that are watching, and if you are in a state where medical cannabis is legal and accessible, I highly recommend getting access to an organization and lobbying them, and actually going down and talking to your state people like we did, and change the law within your state by getting off your lazy asses and contributing to, your society and doing something about it. Because that's what it took for us to continue to do what we do. Even though we're legal and have still medical cannabis, we still have to go down. And this is unfortunately, I think, the mentality that we see in America is what you see in Canada. It's legal, so why does anybody care anymore about it, right? Why should anybody give a fuck? And unfortunately, for the many reasons that you stated, and there are patients finding out every day. Just to give a brief synopsis for people medically, um, before 1900, cancers were 1 in a million. They're now 1 in 2. So that's just to give you perspectives on, there will be and always be a need for medical cannabis and for people to step up and speak out. And Z Smoke Hash, very nice Derby Swiss perk there. Very beautiful. Love his stuff.
You make great points about, just to have affordable access shouldn't mean access to cheap, low quality and especially when we're talking about medicine and the preventative nature of cannabis with cancer. I mean, I find it outrageous that there isn't more focus on that. But we are also faced with the history of prohibition, and that governments do not like to admit they were ever wrong about anything, because then what else are you wrong about? And that's what happened in Canada. At first Trudeau was like, oh, we're going to legalize it because we should stop the criminalization. We should recognize that it's accepted and that it is beneficial, and then slowly flipped into, well, it's a threat to public health and safety. It needs restriction. We need to restrict and limit access, and that messaging changed so much. But you are right about actually just getting in touch with your politicians. That makes such an impact. I mean, I've run for office 5 times. I've been involved in all that. And what the politicians do is they react to what's given to them. If they receive an email, they go, okay, that's interesting. If they receive a phone call, it's like, someone actually cares. This phone call is worth about 10 emails. If someone books a visit to come to their office and sit down and present a piece of paper with some numbers and sentences that they can reference, they're like, this is speaking to at least 100 people. So the reason they do things is because, well, big money and corporate lobbying and all the corrupt nature of humanity. But that aside, you've got actual human beings. When you show up, that's how you make a difference. That's how we got it legal. That's the Million Marijuana March. That's 50,000 people in the streets of Toronto holding up signs and saying, we will not be silenced. You have to get engaged. And I think one of the biggest subjects right now that we are all facing in North America, the toxic drug crisis, hard drugs, fentanyl, drug addiction. And when you're talking about substitution therapy, yes, there's the medical angle for patients who are suffering ailments and illnesses, but let's talk about this drug crisis too, because the Cannabis Substitution Project here in Vancouver, rest in peace Neil Magnuson, who ran that for a while. These are people who break the law every day to provide free or low cost, high quality, high dose edibles and flower to people who are trying to get off hard drugs, and it works. I mean, I've spoken to our city hall. They had a task force on the opioid crisis, and the city government, we will do everything in our power to stop this from happening. And I showed up with a list of 8 studies, at least, from legitimate scientific long-term meta-analysis, all the stuff. Opioid abuse and overdoses go down when cannabis access goes up. And it's been proven time and time and time again. And yet I presented that and I spoke, and they hit the buzzer button when my time was up, and they didn't do a damn thing. And that's very frustrating and discouraging, for sure. Being politically involved, being an activist, is not for the faint of heart, but it does have such an impact if you just don't give up. And I've been saying this a lot lately. The only way to lose, for sure, is to quit. So don't quit. I mean, get out there and keep speaking, because if you don't speak to it, guess who's going to speak to it? Sam, like substance abuse or anti-marijuana groups. You're going to get DARE coming back strong. And right now, back to this drug crisis, in Canada, we have an election coming up. And it's very, very easy for governments that are, let's just call them right wing, even though I hate this left right stuff. It's all blurred together. But you have people who are anti-freedom and pro-punishment, and they want to lump cannabis legalization in with the hard drug crisis that's going on, because there's, in Oregon and elsewhere, there's been discussion about decriminalizing hard drugs. We've got an experiment in Canada. It's back and forth all the time. But one of the risks right now with this horrible crisis is that they're going to say marijuana was legalized and now look what's happened. We need to somehow sever that and say, no, cannabis is not. The legalization of cannabis is actually a solution to this crisis. Don't crack down on all of them together. And, it's a damn shame that this poor little leaf is recognized worldwide as the symbol of drugs. You go internationally and you see a sign, no drugs, no drogas, and whatever it may be, there's the marijuana leaf. But this plant is actually freedom from those hard drugs, and that needs to be spoken about too. But again, it's a commodity that's being taxed like an enjoyable product. And so how do we I mean, this plant is just, it doesn't fit any molds, and it's such a struggle to try and regulate it.
Yeah, so my handle is smoke hash, not dope. And that one got deleted. So now it's like smoke hash, not dope. And the reason I even made that handle is because I had a friend, big fella. I used to play football. He was my right tackle, bigger than me. And he overdosed. Like he's one of those druggies that like, you know what, whatever. He just like he liked to go straight to the source, you know? So fucking he overdosed on fentanyl one day driving like right when he got home, and he crashed into like his neighbor's tree, and his mom ran out of her house and gave him CPR for like 20 minutes till the ambulance got there, and they Narcaned him and whatever, and he survived. So I told him, I was like, bro, come the fuck out to Cali and just smoke, like just help me out, help me drive, help me whatever, do things, and just smoke, and I'll get you dabs. Yeah, BHO, and then rosin was around, and whatever. I just edibles, just like you're saying, along the same lines. Just keep them entertained, because the real demon of our of my generation is boredom, because we're so overstimulated from so young. So it's like you're not like constantly entertained. Your brain is just looking for that drug, and like a cigarette used to do it, you know, or a beer, and now it's like way heavier. Drugs are much more casual. So you know, obviously that's all really bad, but also harm reduction. So that's drugs, all that kind of that eccentric like side of it. Then there's the harm reduction of the people that aren't drug addicts and aren't doing it for that reason, and they want clean cannabis. And we kind of mentioned on like the way testing works. When I was in Zurich, this is when I got in trouble for the music thing. When I was in Zurich, one thing I noticed about their testing is that they also test for nutrients. So like you can't have a ton of nutrients left in your herb, which I like. I've never seen a test on some California blends that does that, but I'm sure if you did it on some of the ones that I'm sure if I went around and smoked some weeds and like just felt how harsh they were, they either would test for too much humidity and they just like pass the humidity testing somehow, or humidity like controls are not proper enough, or they have too much residual nutrients from whatever regimen they're using, and like that's maybe making the plants more plump or making them grow fast, or whatever it is about it, you know. But the you know, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing having all that residual in there. You can feel the pain. It kind of also, what I think it does is it makes herb very bland. Like you with wines, there's a terroir and you're tasting the environment and this and that. But I feel like with cannabis, because we're smoking it, we want to not taste any terroir. We want almost as pure and as just like genetic expression, and just tasting that exact flavor and no flavor from, I like to call them signatures, no signatures from the grow. You know, you should be able to smoke like four different flavor strains, and they taste completely independent of each other. That's what I believe. And a lot of times when you try these big factory reads or people that use a certain regimen that maybe is a little bit overfeeding, you'll notice that they'll have a similar terp that's boosted in all of them, and then their uniqueness will kind of come out. So you kind of smell them, maybe they'll have a little bit more citrusiness to it, and then it's a little runcy, and then it's a little RS11y. And I think that also is reflected in the high. When you smoke it, you'll usually get the same throat scratch from all of it, or the same kind of unpleasantness from it. And then the mental effects will be relatively similar for all of them, a little bit skewed, but not completely unique and completely expressing this like plant's genetic coding, you know? And that's what you're doing. You're like ingesting this like spiritual, and just, you know, you have a whole cannabinoid system. So like it's connecting with it. So if you have these different boosted levels, it's my opinion that you don't get to like tap into that proper kind of balance. And so, you know, I'd love to share. I'd love to share some of the third eye images I have and stuff, just so you guys can see like every strain kind of has its real uniqueness to it, because it's not pushed to grow a certain way. And I like to compare that one to like we're all from different places, you know. So if we all were to eat, if we all did like the same exercises, right, but we all ate our own foods and we all kind of ate what we were like grown up with, we would look relatively different. Like we'd all be strong, but like some of us, we have our different builds. But if we all were fed like just steroids that would overdo, like that kind of overcomes that natural build and that natural coating, and you would just kind of gain the mass kind of excessively. And that's kind of how I've come to compare it to like the nutrient grown regimens.
PGRs.
PGRs. All right, give me a moment here.
Yeah, you're on a phone. That's going to be tricky for sure.
We're gonna figure it out though.
It's much easier on a computer, I'll tell you that. I tell people all the time, especially when you're sharing a screen. I've never figured out how to share my screen on my phone, but on a computer,
Well,
it's very.
I don't quite need to share the screen.
While
Here, I'll share
Oh,
a couple.
you don't
I'll
wanna
share a
share.
couple. I'll share a couple images first. Boom.
Sure.
Add these. So this is the sweet skunk,
Here we go.
14-week indoor.
Boom. Oh yeah, dude. Look at
And-
that.
And if I'm not mistaken, this is
Woo-hoo-hoo.
like one plant.
Oh my. That thing's falling.
Nice.
Flying
Yeah.
Jesus.
Okay, if we're sharing screen, hold up, let me do this.
Yeah, I like that.
Oh, those sparkles.
Is that what $400 a quarter looks like?
Nice swollen bracts.
Yeah, I mean that's what some pure herb looks like. All right. Yeah, let me get comfortable here. Give me just a moment. Let me just do
Sweet skunk. Oh my god, those are ridiculous, dude. That top bud is. I just love sweet skunk. I don't see it so much anymore. That's a
No.
very very good expression of it.
I would say that terminology would be donkey dick-esque.
Chimera just said, "Wow, those are bats."
Yeah.
A baseball.
And he's not easy. Like I don't know, Ryan is a lot. Just you know, it's got to be the real deal for him to up.
Heck yeah.
Dr. Mark, did you want to say what you were going to be saying? You could keep sharing some pictures
Okay,
while
I'm gonna
Dr. Mark
cycle through
goes,
exactly.
and then I think Colin has his hand up after Dr. Mark, so we'll go in that order.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add, first of all, thank you, Jody. Everything you say just is just such a wonderful uh thing, just the way that your whole thing is sort of transpired. And medical, it's weird because medical has always been, kind of the bastard child of the industry, and how do you treat medical when you roll out full use adult use or whatever it's called, recreational use? And it goes back to, again, we said it all the time on Hash Church, all use is medical, and it's like whether or not you understand. I know it looks like Dr. Dave has dropped off, but he's famous for saying whether you understand it or not, these compounds which act on the endocannabinoid system are having a medicinal effect. And when you think about like the whole Schedule 1 listing of the plant, right? Like Schedule 1 says, Schedule 1 drugs, substances, or chemicals are defined as drugs with no current accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. And then you look at the US government's own patent, US 6630507. The abstract reads as such: cannabinoids have been found to have antioxidant properties unrelated to the NMDA receptor. That's N-methyl aspartic acid. That's usually a pretty important neuronal signal that they thought that this thing was acting on, but it doesn't act on that receptor. So it doesn't act by agonizing the NMDA receptor. This newfound property makes cannabinoids useful in the treatment and prophylaxis. Prophylaxis is a term meaning that you're protecting it, kind of like in a prophylactic way. A variety of oxidation associated with diseases such as ischemic and age-related inflammatory and autoimmune disease. So here it is in a document that was, allowed by the USPTO, which is the US Patent and Trade Organization. It basically points to medical use. And claim number one, a method for treating disease caused by oxidative stress comprising administering a therapeutically effective amount of cannabinoid, period. That's medical use. So the whole Schedule 1 listing of cannabis is completely bullshit and fraud, because here's another wing of the government that's saying that these things are medical use. Now, you could, I guess, err on the side of saying, okay, well, that's just a patent and you're claiming medical use and that's fine. But accepted medical use should mean FDA approved drugs. But we know that Marinol and Epidiolex are the active ingredients of FDA approved drugs. That means accepted medical
In
use.
Schedule 3 at that.
Yeah, well, so yeah, my reason for not supporting Schedule 3 is just because Schedule 3 substances, things like ketamine and stuff like that, have to be made at FDA registered facilities. And we know that none of the cannabis production supply chain today happens at a pharmaceutical company. So this would be a way for Big Pharma to basically come in, acquire MSOs, which is probably the reason why MSOs could run in the red and still have some promise of someday pharmaceutical companies coming and buying them, right? Because they have the cannabis production, maybe somehow their FDA GMP certification would extend from their manufacturing of pharmaceuticals to now manufacturing weed. But you'd have to think that again, Schedule 3 cannabis is going to fail miserably. Who's going to buy their weed from a drugstore grown by some MSO, some booth mids? You know, the trap market's going to win all day long if it moves to Schedule 3. It's going to fail. Schedule 3 is going to fail. So I need to remove it from the schedule altogether. And what I just read to you, again, this patent this patent is so fucking cool, man, because it shows that at the NIH, actually the awardee of the patent is the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Who owns the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services? We do, the taxpayers. This is our own government patenting the medical use of cannabis. And from what I understand, there was a period of time. So this patent expired back in 2019. But there was a period of time when this patent was exclusively licensed to a small pharmaceutical company in Doylestown, Pennsylvania called Canalife with a K. And yeah, the Wolf of Wall Street dude was involved in that whole thing. But think about this, ATN. The government was collecting licensing revenue on their cannabis patent while other parts of the government were locking people up still for growing and selling
Oh,
cannabis.
it goes even further. They gave Soli patents and gave him and let him patent whatever he wanted,
Well, I
right?
think
He came up with
so.
a lot of different things too, right?
Yeah, so the
Products.
U.S. Patent and Trade Organization is part of the United States Department of Commerce, and they could give a shit of what the DEA classify. If you show experimental scientific data, and I'm going to read a small part of this paragraph from example 7 in this patent. When you look at the data in the patent, the data scientifically proves that cannabinoids act as antioxidants in the brain, and they don't do so by acting at the NDMA receptor or by the cannabinoid receptors, because there's experiments in this patent that shows when they added a cannabinoid receptor that it didn't make a difference. These things were still working as antioxidants. So they're hitting, I believe, what's now known. So this work is from the late 90s, done at the NIH, again, paid for by our tax dollar, done at the NIH in Bethesda, Maryland, right? And I believe THC that they smuggled over from Meshulam's lab earlier that decade, right? That's a pretty famous story, right? The head of the NIH goes over and visits Raphael Meshulam after they refused to give him funding, and then smuggled back like 10 grams of THC back to Bethesda where they did this work. Well, the work science here is impeccable. It's actually the best science in the world. And again, points to the leadership position that the NIH played in the role of doing medical research that the entire world has benefited from. But I want to read you a particular paragraph. These studies with the non-psychotropic marijuana constituent cannabidiol demonstrate that protection can be achieved against both glutamate neurotoxicity and free radical death damage. Free radicals are formed by something called reactive oxygenated species. And when things act as antioxidants, they quench those species and keep them from doing any further damage. THC, the psychoactive principal component of cannabis, also block glutamate neurotoxicity with the potential potency similar to cannabidiol. In both cases, neuroprotection is unaffected by the presence of a cannabinoid receptor antagonist. See, so they're not acting on the CB1 receptor. This was back in the late 90s. This is before they understood that these things act on a receptor called TRPV1. And TRPV1 is the capsaicin receptor, and cannabinoids act on those receptors. And I believe that's the mechanism by which they impart this neuroprotection. But these results, therefore, surprisingly demonstrate that cannabinoids have useful therapeutic effects. Let me repeat that. Cannabinoids have useful therapeutic effects and are not mediated by the cannabinoid receptors and therefore not necessarily accompanied with the psychoactive side that cannabis is known for. Cannabidiol acts as an anti-epileptic and anti-oxalate. That means it works against anxiety, which makes it particularly useful in the treatment of neurological diseases in which neuroanatomic defects can predispose towards seizures like subarachnoid hemorrhage. So altogether, I mean, this is a bunch of science mumbo jumbo, but what this means is that there is demonstrated medical use. That's what these guys are saying. And these inventors at the NIH proved it. And when this was put in front of the USPTO, they didn't care about Schedule 1, Schedule whatever. They just saw the data and said, you know what? Your data substantiates your results. The other thing I wanted to read was just another claim that was in the patent that talked about a method for treating disease with the cannabinoid that has substantially no binding to the NMDA receptor, comprising and determining whether the disease is caused by oxidative stress. There's so many diseases in the brain, including traumatic brain injury, where oxidative stress is a real problem. A method for treating ischemic. Ischemic has to do with the limitations of blood flow, and that happens during a traumatic brain injury event or during any kind of injury to the brain. You could impede blood flow. And the brain has redundant systems to make sure that it's constantly getting blood. So a method for treating ischemic or neurodegenerative disease in the central nervous system as a subject of comprising administering a therapeutically amount of cannabinoid. So, I mean, again, just to go back to this whole point, Schedule 1 listing of cannabis is total bullshit. And, science proves it. And this patent is like 20 years old. What's known in the 20 years that has unfolded since the research of this patent is how many different receptors CBD acts on. It acts as an allosteric receptor, it's CB1, but it also acts on TRPV1, like I said. It acts on something called PPAR gamma. It has so many different biological targets that it acts on that again, I'm not going to say the wonder drug, but certainly a lead for future drug discovery. So to say that cannabis has no medical use is just total bullshit. But, we've always known that here on Hash Church. I just happened to be doing a deep dive on this patent and Schedule 1 listing. So
Well,
wanted to
we
share
did
that.
we did an even deeper dive on the treaty, right? Our friends Kenzie and Farid actually went to see because we're at the 100th year of prohibition, right? It started in 1925, unfortunately, due to South Africa and Egypt bringing it forward. And what we found that they did not actually go through the proper vetting process and do the due diligence in reviewing cannabis and looking through the proper paperwork for the UN treaty. It wasn't there. So it should have never been made illegal in the first place through the own lack of due diligence at the international level. So, Mark, I'll go you 80 years earlier than that, in that the sense that, people didn't care. They just went along with whatever was there. And that's how we ended up where we are, is people not giving a shit and basically just kind of floating around things and letting things play out the way that they did. And if we actually went out and back and crossed our T's and dotted our I's, we wouldn't even be here, or shouldn't be here. That's the
Yeah, it's just ridiculous because there's no scientific evidence to prove otherwise, right? So the science points us one way. If we really are, basing policy and you the classification of these controlled dangerous substances. I've said it before, cannabis is not dangerous, so it doesn't need to be controlled. Yeah, fentanyl, ketamine, all those other kinds of synthetic things. Ketamine is actually, ironically, we talk about the NMDA receptor. That's where ketamine acts on. And yeah, it produces a different kind of analgesia, which I guess clinically could be useful. I'm bummed that Dr. Dave dumped because I know that he wanted me to go through this. And there was another patent that he asked me to look at, I guess, Marcus, maybe for Journal Club, but it was a patent by El Sole, who made some derivatives to increase water solubility of THC. But we'll talk about that when Dr. Dave's back on. But yeah, I mean, it's just the whole Schedule 1 listing of cannabis and everything that comes along with it, 280E, the fact that I think there's still people in jail, right, ATN? Still people in jail. Vets can lose their benefits from using cannabis. And,
No, no,
there's
no,
this,
no. You cannot. No, 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 no. Veterans cannot lose their benefits in the United States for doing so. There is, I just did a whole show on this on Friday. It's VHA Directive 1315, which is originally in 2010, modified in 2011, 2017, and again in 2023. You cannot lose your benefits for discussing cannabis with your veterans. And the modification in 2023 really pushes the doctor assistance and protection in allowing you to have that discussion. Now, they can't prescribe it, they can't recommend it, they can't fill out the paperwork. However, it doesn't stop, because again, the problem, which why Mark says this, is because we have a problem of treatment by geography. Because I can get and discuss cannabis legally in states where it is legal. However, in states where it's not, it is a problem. And you're dealing with, of course, ideologies of individual doctors, misinformation. And we know that doctors are not very educated on the endocannabinoid system. We know that the doctors are and the VA are not understanding of what Directive 1315 is and why people need to bring it in and educate themselves on it. My organization, Veterans Action Council, did a show, a roundtable on Friday, strictly on this to educate veterans, because we're always getting asked, I don't want to discuss it with my doctor because I'm going to lose my benefits.
right.
You can't lose your benefits. So I just wanted to clarify that, but everything else you said, 100% on point.
Well, that's great news, and that's relatively recent that they've changed that, right, ATN? I mean, it wasn't always like that, right?
No, it started in 2010 due to Michael Krawitz, who's on the show. He actually affected that change, and the effective activism that he did is he brought it to them, and the trick in the activism is then getting them to accept it as their own and literally embody it as themselves, which they did, which was something that is not easy to do. Most people want to take credit for the things that they do, not hand it off and let the kind of baby grow up. And that's what they did with the VA. But as I was saying, because they're not educated about it, it's taken years and years for people to find out what the directive is. And it was only through a Freedom of Information Act request I did a few months ago that I actually got the most updated one, so that we were updated to know, because they updated it to have the language of the Farm Bill in it. so that they could discuss cannabis and cannabinoids as well as CBD. So that is legal for you to discuss with your doctor. You cannot lose your benefits. However, depending on where you are in the VA, they can, fuck with you, and I hate to say that, but that's a reality that happens to some people depending on their pain meds, and they can lose access if they're on high medications for high pain meds. They can lose those because of doctors manipulation and their own body politics, etc. So that is the challenge I think that the veterans are facing, and the frustration and the fear is real and palpable, because people who are usually on heavy pain meds go toward cannabis. But a recent VA study showed that 1 in 5 veterans are using cannabis medicinally, and that's
What
significant.
about active military? So if people are in the military right now, is there a
They
policy?
cannot, and there is no policy, and they're forbidden from even using CBD and THC. But we are working on that, because in states where it's legal, you have the right to use when you are off duty, the same way you're allowed to drink alcohol, right? You can't drink alcohol while you're on duty, but when you go home, you can drink to your heart's content. Just don't show up drunk the next day, right? Well, people want to medicate with cannabis, and that's why, such as in California with the quasi legalization that we've seen, what has won? The drinks. Cannabis drinks. Why? Because they're low dosage, 1, 3, 5, 10% THC, which shows us that the consumer wants a cannabis equivalent to beer. They don't want to be, like Jody said, they won't be overwhelmed. They want to have something nice to go through the whole day, that Jamaican cannabis that she was talking about, right? So that you don't feel absolutely floored. And the individual consumer, as we were saying, only has a lighter. So by having just a simple drink, they don't have to deal with all the accoutrement and all of this stuff, which isn't cheap and comes with its own learning curve. And that's less than 1% of us that are really like that. And where the individual consumer just wants something to pop, top, drink, and get the effect. Okay, whether that's right or not, whether we want it or not, that's what the consumer is shown they want.
Yeah, you mean 1 milligram, 5 milligram, and 10 milligram, not percent, right? Yeah, I
Yes,
figured.
correct. Milligrams. Yes,
Yeah,
not percent. Pardon me.
10% cannabis drink would floor any of us. It's enough
Well,
for a
David
week.
would have loved it.
Yeah, I mean it's a growing sector, and uh I don't know if you've seen this, ATN, but there's a lot of states that are trying to now regulate this hemp-derived D9, and that's a lot of the active ingredient that's going into those um beverages, like in Minnesota, and I think Wisconsin now allows beverages. So yeah, this hemp-derived D9 stuff, which, everyone's saying, well, it's naturally derived, it's naturally derived. It's like, no, it's naturally derived if you want to pay 10 times the amount for your input. But, for big beverage, they want a cheap input, and the chemically converted stuff is the stuff that's in the market today. So it's a big experiment on, is this okay? I mean, in some states they say no, in some states they say yes, but with big beverage getting in, they have already established distribution channels that are going to make this thing just so available, right? Convenience stores, liquor stores, just everywhere. So I don't know what everybody else thinks of that. I think it's a little messed up, but
Very messed up. But Colin, you see it
Hey,
in various
yeah,
states, right?
yeah, I've just been kind of patient because I've been like, there's so much to take in. There's so many places we've been in the last like 15 minutes alone. But you know, it's just to touch on what Dr. Mark's saying. It's interesting to ask that question. And is HD9 okay? And I think from a chemistry point of view, I think that's really where we need to ask the question. Is it okay from a chemistry point of view? And do we understand how it's going to affect the human body from a toxicology point of view? And it doesn't sound at any point that I've ever heard any chemist say that that is actually factually true. I know that we can ingest it, I know that we can make products with it, but I've never heard someone say, "Oh yeah, that's, go ahead, put that in your pipe," including yourself, Mark. So
Well,
I,
it's just not clean. I mean, there's no products that are out there that just that. So if you take THCA, pure THCA diamonds, so
yeah,
completely pure, 99.999, and you decarboxylate those, you're going to get a very high THC input, right? Which is probably where, you know, THC should be. That's probably how THC should be made for these applications. In a lot of cases, again, like if you're distilling an extract like ethanol extract or some type of solvent extract, you're not just going to get THC, you're going to get some of the other minor cannabinoids that might be in that strain or might be in that variety. But for the most part, like a lot of, trim isn't strain specific and it gets combined and you're just distilling over kind of like a high THC extract that sometimes could actually isomerize. What I found is that just on heating Delta 9, you could isomerize it just on heat alone over to Delta
right,
8. So in a
right.
distillate, you might find some Delta 8, even though you're starting with mostly Delta 9. And if, in fact, I think when they first started making Delta 8 distillate, the guys at the Clear and some other places like the Guild Extracts and whatnot, California,
Hmm.
they were using these decolorizing clays. And I think they were using it to mostly clean up, color, and not realizing that the acidity of the clay was going to convert the Delta 8 or the Delta 9 into Delta 8.
Right.
And they were getting these clear distillates, right? That's where
Yeah.
the clear came from, right?
Right.
And they were just completely isomerized. And yeah, Delta 8 itself, I think, doesn't have any more toxicity to humans than Delta 9. But it's the other non-natural isomers that are made in the CBD conversion process that we just don't know. There's just not enough information known on, if you have like, 2 or zero point 0.2 or even as high as 10% of those in your distillate, what does that mean when you take that THC input and now dilute it to a 10 milligram beverage? I mean, I think the notion is that, well, there's so little of it in there, right? And if you think about it, one of the great things about beverages is the majority of what you're selling is water, right? So the margin on beverages can be really compelling, right? Because once you've invested into a canning line or you have a JV with a local canner, I mean, the canning lines can cost a lot of money, and certainly customizing cans, there's companies that can do that. Prices of all that stuff is going to go up because of the tariffs, by the way. It's going to be really difficult. I mean, again, like if you're in big beverage, THC is just an ingredient. It's just an input, right? They're already making orange soda, they're making ginger ale, they're making grape soda to make, oh, you want a THC soda? Just give me the input. We just get the input, put it in the bright tank, fill the cans, and you got a beverage, right? What was really important, I guess, was that, for the most part, cannabinoids just don't have any water solubility. So you had to come up with a good emulsion that not only was stable, but it tasted good at the loading that you were putting these things in there. We've talked about the emulsion before. Always think of milk, right? An oil and water emulsion. You're emulsifying fat or oil into a continuous water phase. So that requires the use of chemists would call them surfactants. We call them emulsifiers, right? Things that basically emulsify oil into water. And yeah, if you're doing this like for medical reasons, like you're trying to make soluble THC because you're interested in injecting it into rats or whatever, yeah, you could use things like polysorbate 80 and polysorbate 20. These things will, if you try putting into a beverage, will have a very medicinal, bitter aftertaste, right? They'll just taste like crap. So what's been the real advantage is that companies like Azuka, Vertosa, Source, these companies now provide basically emulsions that are not only, stable, but that actually at the level that you're putting that many milligrams into a beverage actually taste good. Some of the old beverages they told you to shake because they would separate out into like a oil and vinegar kind of thing, and you have to shake it to make it. But no, you don't have to do that anymore. And again, it's for big beverage, Colin, this is just okay. It's just another SKU, right? And if you could put,
Hmm. Yeah.
whatever, botanical extract du jour into some beverage, and it's just, again, going to increase their footprint at these liquor stores. I know Total Wine has got
Yeah.
these huge displays of, just different brands and different flavors.
Yeah.
What they're mostly differentiated on is the label and the flavor and everything, but it's all the same stuff. It's just, nano emulsified or maybe micro emulsified THC. And at like a 5 or 10 milligram dose, you don't really have to worry about stability. But yeah, I mean, I think the beverage sector, like ATM was saying, the convenience of just going to like a convenience store, buying a 4-pack, buying a 6-pack, or I like the notion of like, hey, if you're stocking up for your party, you're going to go buy booze, right? You're going to go buy vodka and rum and gin. Well, now at the same store, I could buy a bunch of cannabis beverages for my guests. And that way at my party, I could have liquor for the people who like liquor, and I could also have cannabis beverages for the people who choose to do that. I always like going to a party where they have cannabis beverages. I'm like, okay, it's kind of like the modern thing, right? Or like they have either a dab bar or there's something basically to serve, the cannabis consuming people. And it's great that I guess at bars now and lounges you can get a cannabis beverage as an alternative to a liquor beverage. But I guess the
Yeah.
thing going back to the Delta 9 THC thing is that,
The conversion
at
game.
first when they were converting it, they weren't very sophisticated in their chemistry and they were making mostly Delta 8. They've now figured out. So in this reaction, when you take CBD and you take a molecule, kinetically, the first thing it forms is Delta 9. Then
Right.
often under the conditions, the Delta 9 converts over to Delta 8. Well, chemistry converters have gotten more sophisticated and they figured out how to stop exclusively at Delta 9. And you could see Delta 9 levels as high as like 85, 90% almost, but there's still kind of like 10% of other stuff in there. And typically that other stuff are these isomers or these things that sometimes coalute by HPLC. So when you're looking at your COA, it might say, 90% Delta 9, but really there's a couple other components that are under that Delta 9. And so I think until we really have that conversion process optimized, kind of like in a pharmaceutical sense, meaning that you want to basically have product specifications where you might do one run and it doesn't meet product specs, and you either have to throw it out or reclaim it or do column chromatography on it. The problem with these things, Colin, is that all the byproducts all have the same polarity. So if you're trying to separate them by chromatography, it's really super difficult. And they have the same boiling point. So you can't separate them by distillation, can't separate them by chromatography. Where we see separation is that if you use, rather than HPLC method, if you use a GC method, you can tease out these minor isomers. And so some of the labs that are now doing hemp-derived D9 testing for third-party producers are looking at a combination of using HPLC and GC to kind of tease out, how much of
Makes
these
sense.
minor components are in there. But we just
Yeah.
don't know. And I'm sure you guys heard about that story in Florida about the guy who took the Delta 8 gummy, right? I guess he wasn't a big user. And he's like, okay, let me just take this gummy. Took a gummy and he suffered from cardiac arrest within like 6 hours. And certainly, I think he was predisposed to this heart condition, but
Sure.
I guess the gummy made his heart race or it just made him all cold and sweaty. And, he didn't die from the gummy. He died from, cardiac arrest. But did the gummy kind of push him over that cliff? until we really have widespread safety studies, I think chemical conversion is something that they need to really be careful on and maybe set just product specifications for as high a delta 9 purity as you can get. But maybe the other thing is that maybe the reason why, I mean, this is a commodity market, right? So low cost is always going to win. And if you think about it, so CBD is now somewhere around $300-400 a kilo, right? So at $300-400 a kilo, you're going to be able to chemically convert that
Right.
into THC at a lot lower price point than say starting with THCA that you've grabbed from the plant, right? So this is pristine THCA that you're now going to decarboxylate to make that same THC input for the drink. The conversion route just is economically superior at this time because of the price of CBD. So
Yeah. Yeah, and crude, you could do it with crude too, but it's really easy to for these drink companies that are established because they have the infrastructure to add this, as you said, to as an ingredient. It's just another ingredient to the line, right? And then there's formulation work in between that that's they're masters of. So you're totally right. In the regulated sense, it's not very profitable as a overall business. There's very slim margins state by state to do a drink, but when you get to the larger case sizes and pallet sizes, yeah, that's where it makes sense for these guys.
yeah, where the high margins are is when
Yeah.
you control that channel to the marketplace. But
Yep.
believe me, the it's not like the people making hemp derived THC are probably at a much smaller margin. So the people who are making these inputs now, these
Yeah.
inputs are widely available. And I guess, California's got lawsuits against companies because, yeah, cannabis coming into California, not really cool for with the California businesses. They don't like that. So being able to kind of get like the hemp derived products into large markets like California, Colorado, Michigan, where there's a large cannabis lobby who's like, no, we want to sell the D9 THC, not you
Right.
guys, but the
Right.
hemp derived market is just a much larger addressable market, and there's some very deep pockets in that. And we're not even touching on the whole testing thing, which is really upsetting a lot of state markets because right now there's
Right.
people who are passing moldy flower at the sake of getting testing revenue business, and
Right.
the labs who are failing some of those producers for mold and total yeast and whatnot, those labs are going out of business. Why? Because people don't want those results on their and after you've plowed all this money into your genetics, your grow team, your grow facility, your license, the lights, the cameras, I mean, everything that you need to do. Oh, and don't even mention 280E, right? By the time you get to it, if you have that batch of cannabis fail, I mean, that really affects your bottom line. So part of it is the free enterprise that's happening, but having labs who are knowingly passing moldy weed and giving them, good COAs so that stuff can be sold really compromises the whole industry and puts patients at risk. And yeah, my dogs don't like it neither. You can probably hear them barking.
Yeah, well, I think, what you're really going into is the lack of ethical practices because there's no governing body to check up on anyone essentially in this sector. And that's been my biggest gripe with all of it is that those that are doing it they just don't care, and that's an issue because everything has been built on trust, quality is built on trust, that promise is built on trust. And a lot of this is being decimated because of its power over numbers, right? It's like they're going after big numbers, big pallet sizes, and they're trying to influence new users that weren't necessarily interested in this segment. And it's great that they're doing that, but they're also decimating things along the way. And it's hard because, as you said, how are you bringing herb into California when there's already so much of it? It's a prohibition, cannabinoid, right? As you've said so many times, Mark, like these are just ways around the inevitable, which is we need to get there. Go ahead, Jody.
Oh, this is fascinating. First of all, huge respect and admiration. You guys sound like mad scientists. Like this is next
Well,
level.
I'm a scientist, but I'm not mad. I'm not mad at the moment, but I can get mad, Jody, if you want me to get mad.
Really mad about this whole conversation, like this exploitation of the market by people who are just in it for profit. Like that's definitely sad. Like there's a lot of talk around this Delta 9 conversation. I'm not as educated about it as I am becoming right now. So thank you for the insights. But I also just wanted to note that you know it is true that alcohol and big companies are moving into this space. And again, I just hope that the plant kind of refuses to be exploited for too long. You know, we've seen some big corporate entities fail because they've tried to just take advantage of this plant and they're just profit driven and pure greed, and somehow it didn't work out for them. I mean, they got paid along the way millions of dollars, but their stock value and existence has been reduced to rubble. But hopefully this plant will not be restricted and constrained and exploited for too long. But I also just wanted to say thank you. I don't, Bubble Man is not on camera, but he might still be around there. But I thank you guys all for this opportunity to join in and learn. I do have to take off now, take my leave, and you know, I just want to express gratitude for this feeling that I'm getting of, you know, it's there's so many of us all around the world and in far distances from each other, but we're all united by this. Like it is something that's connecting us worldwide, and like so many people are going to benefit from this. We are on a forward path. I truly believe things will get better for us and our industry, but again, just requires our commitment and not to quit. And so keep having these conversations, keep educating. I'm still learning as we go, and it's exciting to know that there's so much new stuff ahead that we get to have an impact on. So thank you to all of you so much, and I hope you have a beautiful rest of your Sunday.
Thank you, Jody. It was a pleasure having you today. I know Marcus really
Always
loved
an
it.
honor.
Thank you. We'll see you next time. Maybe I'll be with Bubble Man up in Lions Bay, hitting that.
Yeah, that would be great to see you again. You're welcome anytime, as you know. So
Well, we'll
have
see
a
you
great
guys.
day.
Blessings. Take
It was a
care.
pleasure. Peace. So I want to introduce, our familiar face Wade, and I saw Fletcher come into the room. Um, I know he's doing a bunch of stuff in New York over the next week. If he wants to jump in and talk about it. Wade, if you want to say some words, I'd love to hear from you, man. How you doing?
Um, I have a lot to say today, um, so I don't want to take up too much time. Have we had the chance to hear from the Z Smoke Hash Not Dope fella? And
We
okay,
have. We've heard plenty. It's been great getting to know him and his story and his background. He's got a good team out there in SoCal. So
well, okay. Um, I'll dive in. I've once again had a rough morning. Um, I won't get into gory details, but um, the physical body um, can be quite a challenge at times. So part of what I wanted to talk about is I've kind of made a big decision about my treatment. I've stopped taking the poison pills that they were giving me for chemotherapy. I've talked to my doctors about it. Some of them are like, yeah, go do it, do it. Others are like, oh no, we have lots of alternative treatments. And a lot what's been going on for me over the last 4 years plus, I've come to recognize that, at least in the case of my condition, what happens is the doctors offer me a cocktail of this and that and that. And we don't worry too much about side effects. We're looking for benefit. And often those cocktails do give me benefit. It shows up in better blood work and whatnot. Um, the problem is it does not usually translate to me feeling better. And the last part of that is, again and again, what has happened for me is that the particular cocktail that I'm on this month, it's no longer has any efficacy for my condition. And so then we stop and reconsider and give me a new cocktail. And what I've come to realize is, yeah, these cocktails, they work for a couple of months and then they don't. And each of them is an attempt to prolong my life, which I'm grateful to the doctors for that. But I've really come to question, is all the other side effects from these medications worth a couple more months of a pretty uncomfortable life? So probably won't be coming as a surprise to the you folks, but I've decided to, in addition to suspending taking my poison pills, and again, my doctors are aware of what I'm doing, I'm going to take on a pretty serious regimen of cannabis therapies. And what's true is I've gotten to know a little bit about that over the years. I've not seen much science around potential efficacy of specific cannabinoids. I saw a paper published in Italy last year that called out CBG and CBN as showing some efficacy for 3 different versions of multiple myeloma. That's the other thing. They call it multiple myeloma because there's so many different versions of it. And that's part of the problem for the doctors trying to find some cocktail that works for my condition. So anyway,
Well, Wade, we all support you in your decisions, and you know how much we love you here at Hash Church. And your journey is so inspiring for so many reasons. You've helped so many countless patients. It's it's all inspiring, I think, for the whole community out there. You've laid the groundwork for what is the roadmap as how to take care of multiple patients time and time again. Harlequin has touched so many people, and that's just incredible. It's something I don't think um, you can truly put into perspective and until you really dive in, and it'll take a long time. But you've really touched so many people, so your decision is fully supported, um, and we're here for you. So Hash Church loves you, man.
well,
Thank
thank
you
you,
for
Colin.
sharing that with us.
Yeah,
I love you. We love you.
yeah,
So,
Absolutely,
you know,
Wade.
it's part of what makes this decision somewhat uncomfortable. I have family members who are going to raise hell with me about it. Um, I have, I mean, they love me, but they're big believers in the pharmaceutical path, and one of them's a doctor, and he's very opinionated about things. He loves me very much. And I would just say that part of why I wanted to really say this in public for the first time on Hash Church is I would welcome any of our doctors or clinicians or persons of opinion, including you, Dr. Mark, of potential benefit from specific cannabinoids, because I'm fortunate enough here in Nevada County and certainly in other parts of Northern California to have a pretty wide array of folk who make good product who would welcome the chance to help me. I've never had to ask for help in this way. Um,
Yeah, Wade, I just posted a link to a review entitled "The Influence of Cannabinoids on Multiple Myeloma Cells." It's a review, and there's a lot of literature references in there on specific studies that you may or may not want to look at. So let me know if you need access to any of those papers and you can't find them. I think most of them are available on PubMed, or if you go to the NIH listing of those, I think you could find uh full access to those. But if you need any, feel free to reach out. You're in touch with me on email. But it looks like, yeah, there's a lot of promising research that shows that cannabinoids can have an impact on multiple myeloma. I don't know much about the disease, but I'll uh I'll look into it, and if I find anything that's particularly useful or enlightening, I'll pass it along to
Thank you, Dr. Mark.
you.
Yeah, it's I feel like it's an exciting adventure, if you will. I gotta
Can
believe that.
can I ask what the medicine or what the poison pills was it cisplat
Yes,
that you're
the over the last 4 years, I've had variations of a drug called Revlimid, lenalidomide, and the most recent version of it is Pomalyst. They're all in the same chemical family as thalidomide.
okay?
Yeah.
And you said that they were effective at first, but your body grew a tolerance to it, or it was no longer effective.
Yes, that's the short story. Um, at least one situation where I was doing an extremely high dose of that medication. At that point, it was still called Revlimid, 25 milligrams a day, plus an experimental drug that was intended to make Revlimid and the other drugs in the cocktail I was taking more effective. It was part of a study I was in. But
Okay, but were you also getting radiation or um any
oh,
other
no,
anti-tumor therapy?
only when first diagnosed, Dr. Mark, I got um, a course of radiation and heavy chemotherapy when I was first diagnosed at Stanford.
Right.
And then they let me go. And yeah, ever since then, it's been variations on the poison pill thing. And yeah, it's not clear to me that maybe that high dose was working for the cancer, but it was playing hell with me. The rest of me was like not tolerating it at all.
What were some
Anyway,
of your
yeah.
what were some of the side effects? Were you feeling nauseous or
Oh no, no, no. Heart rate at
okay.
150, 160 beats a minute
Oh,
by going to the bathroom. That amount of physical activity was enough to get my heart rate up to that range. And there were a couple of episodes where it took me a half hour or more to get my heart rate down to below 100 beats a minute.
oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was that situation seems to be well in hand with a handful of pharmaceutical drugs that I'm going to go through with my cardiologist about, do I need to take this one? Do I need to take this one? Because yeah, I'm really wanting to get out of the whole pharmaceutical mad loop. I take way too many pills intended to help me. Many of them are intended to help me with side effects of other drugs that I've taken. It's
It's a
anyway.
never-ending
Uh,
loop. It's a never-ending
sorry.
loop, right? It's a never-ending loop. They give you drugs to treat the side effects of the other drugs you're taking. And yeah, I mean, as your body gets old, I mean, hey, I'm 62. I know I'm on a statin and blood pressure lowering medication. I got to take these things every day. I'm not happy about it, but I guess the alternative is, I die from heart disease, which I don't want to do. Um, and yeah, I think the US pharmaceutical companies hook on to that, insurance payday and make sure that, yeah, our medicines here in the US cost a whole lot more than they do elsewhere. And yeah, you got to wonder again with them talking about whacking, you know, a Medicaid. Again, I don't want to get political, but a lot of people healthcare is going to be impacted on that. And you can't draw blood from a stone, right? So if they're going to make budget cuts somewhere, somewhere that money's got to come from. And you hate to think that, again, the most vulnerable people in our population who rely on that assistance might not get it, and people are going to suffer and die because of it. But just go back to your condition again. So this was something that they had diagnosed after they found cancer, or was it was all part of the same diagnosis?
It was all part of the same diagnosis. I first presented as trouble. Well, I'll tell the short version of the story. I broke a rib sitting up in bed at night to go to the bathroom. And I had broken enough ribs earlier in my life to know that, yeah, how in the hell do you break a rib sitting up in bed? I went ahead and peed, hoping that it was a spasm instead of a cracked rib. But in the morning, it was very clear to me it was a cracked rib. So I got in touch with my primary. And anyway, this was around September. And then at Thanksgiving, um, I'd had an x-ray. He confirmed that, yeah, you've got a cracked rib. He kept telling me I must have fallen. I kept telling him I hadn't. And then, yeah, I was sitting at our wood burning stove and made a sudden movement with a load of firewood in my arms. And all of a sudden I couldn't move. It was a nightmare, and ended up in an ambulance at the hospital. Eventually, somebody dropped, this is our local rural hospital. Somebody dropped a neck brace into the gurney that I was in and then took off, didn't explain how to put it on or why I needed to or any of that. Eventually, an orderly came by and asked me why I wasn't wearing my neck brace. And I said that nobody had told me why I needed to wear it. And he looked around and he leaned in and he said, "You have multiple myeloma, and I'm sorry for you." And then he walked away. And a few minutes later, a nurse came and showed me how to put on my neck brace. And I asked her if was multiple myeloma a form of cancer? And she said, yes, it's a blood cancer that we have a lot of trouble with. And but you're in good hands. We're about to send you down to Sacramento. And yeah, I spent a week at Sacramento getting chemotherapy, drugs. They were still trying to figure out what to do with me. None of the big hospitals in the Bay Area would take me. Eventually, eventually I went down to Stanford where I got the radiation and chemo, and then they let me go. Eventually, they called me back because the vertebrae in my spine were being eroded to the point that, well, I'd lost about 4.5 inches of height. And one of them at T8, thoracic vertebrae number 8, had lost about 75% of its vertebral body. And the neurosurgeon that I was working with, whom I loved very much, Dr. Zikarakis, she said that she was concerned that if I sneezed real hard or coughed, that I could end up paralyzed from there down, which sounded like a terrible idea. And so, yeah, Monica bundled me up in the car and took me to Stanford where, yeah, they checked me into the ER and I got titanium rods and screws from T5 to T12. And then they sent me home with no pain relievers, which I thought was pretty rude. But we got that sorted out. And yeah, ever since then, it's been different versions of that drug, that family of drugs related to thalidomide. And yeah, the side effects are everything from, like, my vision has changed pretty substantially. It's hard for me to read emails anymore, or books for that matter. It's kind of frustrating. There's this rapid heart thing. There's no appetite. I mean, the list is long. I'm not going to go into it. It's fairly typical for folks dealing with cancer. But yeah, I feel ready to be a person dealing with cancer and managing my situation with the aid of the cannabis plant. It sounds like an exciting adventure, and hell, who knows, it might work. Might
Did they
get,
tell you what stage you're at, Wade? Like, are you stage 1, 2, or 3? Do you know?
um, they don't really do stages with myeloma. They talk about smoldering, which I suppose would be comparable to stage 1. I'm not smoldering. I'm hotter than that. One of the things that's been interesting over the last year is my blood work goes up and down and up and down and up and down, and nobody's sure why that is. And yeah, I'm just feeling more and more like I'd really love to see, one, what my blood work does if I do a month or two of cannabis therapies, and two, I know for sure my side effects will change. Um, it'll be interesting to see. I'm imagining that I'll be talking about significant doses. And I got to say, I've never really enjoyed ingesting high doses of cannabis. I prefer inhaling them, but I can't get the kind of doses that I think I'm going to be using for my situation. But I'm going to explore it with some of the clinicians I know, and yeah, do a whole lot of following my heart. That's always worked well for me in working with other persons, that it was easy for me to find compassion, which led me to action in knowing a person. And in all of those situations, to some extent, I followed what I had learned by reading and studying the kind of things that Mark, you pointed to. Thank you for that. I will dive into that. Be interesting to see if I can read it. Yeah, I just got to say, I feel like I'm making a good choice. And the other thing that I can say is that if it's not working, if the cancer just goes absolutely apeshit, I can go back to those poison pills that, yeah, I can decide if the side effects are worth the life extension possibilities. I really like the idea of dealing with the side effects of cannabis for its life extending possibilities. It just makes a lot of sense. I've talked for years about this. Now I'm going to live it for myself. And I think really the community, I just want to say, I mean, people have been very kind. The folks at Puffco have tried to fix me up with one of their units, and Etienne brought me one, and I'm still figuring out how to work it, but I like it. I love it. Yeah, really, I'm at a loss for words. I feel like this community is, yeah, I'm gonna live it for real for myself. And I will share with you all what's happening and how it works. And so, Somehow I'm envisioning not months, but years of life extension on this path. And won't that be a wonderful story? Why not? Okay, that's enough of Wade.
I can't imagine a better story, Wade. I can't imagine a better story. We're here for it. We're gonna walk next to you while you're that path, and it's heavy, brother. So really glad that you're to keep making the choice, even while I'm sure many voices in your head tell you, no, no, don't go to church, do that, but please do, always come here this time with us. And there's a lot of people who are just very touched by you as a person and all the work that you've done, and that we're all just blessed to be able to be a part of your journey. And I'm 100% seeing years regards to life extension over months. Much like Sam, way that even after you're gone, you won't be gone. You'll still be here. We'll still be carrying all of us, each other, the same way we carry Sam. We will undoubtedly carry you the same way. So let's keep you here for as many years as possible. But understand that it's all going to take us out in the end. We're all going in that direction, and hopefully we've made our mark in the world half as good as you have. And we'll always have people remembering us and sharing our stories, and that is a definite promise that the Hash Church community will always speak extremely high laughter.
Well, I think it's an educated decision that you've made, Wade. And, again, when you think about, the fact that the endocannabinoid system helps your body heal itself by keeping the body at homeostasis, which is a way of, you could think of immunotherapy, right? Because the body's own system is its immune system. And so certainly, cancer can be attacked by these other drugs, the cannabis can help with the nausea, can help stimulate appetite, can help with insomnia, anxiety, and we're not even talking about the anti-tumor properties of cannabinoids themselves, which have been shown to promote apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. So there's a lot of research out there that says that cannabinoids do this in petri dishes. The work of Manuel Guzman in Spain has shown that THC in particular obliterates cancer cells, right? He shows the cell before, the cell after, and the cell's just gone, right? So there are anti-tumor properties in cannabis itself, but certainly like to think about just easing your condition by helping you with sleep, helping you, control the anxiety that certainly the situation that you're in, with a blood-borne disease. I mean, things like, bone marrow transplants. I mean, these things are exceedingly difficult and exceeding the kind of things too that are like the most expensive procedures that hospitals, do. You think about a bone marrow transplant, you're taking bone marrow from a donor and putting into a recipient. I mean, this is not trivial. And again, I wish Dr. Dave was still on so we could talk to him more about the medical condition, but I would think that cannabinoids in general, you'd want to have a full spectrum delivery. So you'd want to have certainly CBD in there, CBG, most certainly THC. It seems like THC has got the most promising anti-cancer effect of any of the other cannabinoids. And obviously, helping you just by giving you maybe a relaxed state of mind, reducing your anxiety, reducing thinking about your condition so you can just maybe have a few moments of, just meditation or bliss or whatever it is. I can imagine I read incessantly. If I couldn't read, that would drive me crazy. That would kind of like be chopping off my hands. I couldn't play guitar anymore. I mean, I know how hungry you are for knowledge, Wade, and if there are uh, references or things that you need read to you, if you send them to me by email, we could set up some time and I could digest these papers and I could read them to you if you need that. And anything that you need on the scientific side, like if you need me to look at a paper or you need me to look at any, I know there's like when you Google multiple myeloma and cannabinoids, you know, you get all the patient sites like Mayo Clinic will has got a little thing on it. All these, places are trying to help their patients mostly just get through the treatment of the disease. It sounds like the treatment of the disease is worse than the goddamn disease itself. That's often the case, right? Because you're basically ingesting yourselves with, yeah, things like poisons that are going to have a lot of collateral damage. And maybe again, that's where the cannabinoids can help. Cannabinoids could help, mitigate some of that damage. And again, maybe take away some of the pain and take away some of the side effects. I don't know. I mean, again, I haven't studied these medicines greatly. I don't know like exactly what type of synergistic effect cannabinoids can have on those, but your uh situation would dictate that, only you can be your best judge on whether or not that actually makes you feel better. Certainly, like when you looked at patients who were on chemotherapy and they were just completely decimated and not able to eat, cannabis helped them encourage their appetite. It helped with insomnia. It helped with some of the side effects that these medicines could have. Because you're absolutely right. These medicines are poison, and you're trying to kill the cancer and mitigate the collateral damage that they have. But that's a very, very difficult place to be in.
It's definitely extremely heavy duty. I really want to thank Wade for coming and sharing. It's hard to share in that vulnerable situation, and we're always here for you, Wade. Definitely want you to you will get an invite to Hash Church indefinitely forever. So we always hope that you make it. I want to thank everyone for watching today. I do have I was supposed to stop at 12 today as well, it's my daughter's 24th birthday today. So I'm trying to get back home. I'm up in Whistler right now. And my 10-year-old son is up on the mountain watching this thing called the Slush Cup, which is where they dig out a big pool and then the skiers and snowboarders fly down the mountain and go over jumps and they fall into the water and it's a very hot dog-esque 70s, 80s culture thing that Whistler is keeping alive here during the World Snowboard and Ski Festival. So there's this really cool aspect of culture. And of course, I want to experience it with my son because looking through the eyes of a 10-year-old boy who shares your genetic makeup and is like a little version of you is just the greatest thing you could ever do in life. I haven't quite got to grandkids stage, so there, maybe it gets better. I don't know, but I do want to go celebrate his youth and his just joy of watching these adult people be absolute and complete and total maniacs. And then if all fares well, I'm going to head over with my homie, Devin, who's right there. Devin's helped me out in Whistler many times. We've done Hash Church from his house in the past, and he builds an igloo up in the backcountry each year. He digs it out, and sometimes he'll sleep there overnight and befriend local animals and it just beyond cool mountain culture. So we're going to go see his igloo after the Slush Cup, and hopefully it hasn't collapsed. He's been away for a while. Visiting a friend in California who was also going through some cancer treatment right now that he was going to offer support for. So yeah, I just want to thank everyone for making Hash Church what it is. It's so much more serious than just conversations about cultivars and genetics and the business aspect of it and even the activism aspect of it. And in the end, the most purest form is that it's a medicine and that we all realize that. And it's It's probably, like Ryan said, what got us into trouble with all these damn regulations. We just jammed it down their throat that it was a medicine. And then they were like, okay, it's a medicine. We're going to regulate it like a medicine. Oh, shit. Probably should have kept the lie going. Maybe just told them that it's recreational and has no medicinal benefits whatsoever. But we couldn't do that. We needed to get it out to the people. And thank God that we did. I want to thank everyone who's watching right now. I want to thank Puffco, who's been a huge, huge promoter of Hash Church and supporter of all these amazing events and community and people. So we thank you, Jolly Roger and Chelsea and James and all the good folks at Puffco, as well as Grandmaster LEDs and Bubble Bags. Thanks for sponsoring today's show. I really hope that the full melt blesses all of your bowls sooner than later, because my goodness, isn't that important? And I hope to see you all next Sunday, which is going to be our annual big cannabis holiday, right? 420. So we'll see you all April 20th back here at Hash Church. Smokes hash, no, not dope. Thank you for coming in, dude, and sharing your photos and sharing your passion about the plant. And maybe one day we'll get your homies out of the, not into the spotlight necessarily, but maybe they'll come on like a Skunk Man Sam comes on sometimes, or every time he ever came on, which was just with the camera off his face on he had a little stuffed animal or sometimes a bong or whatever, but he'd basically never come on camera. So that's always open to your partners who want to come and talk a bit differently in regard to cannabis and getting it to express so beautifully. We'll make sure we have you on as well. Again, Colin, thanks for co-hosting. As always, Dr. Mark, Etienne, huge thank you to Jodie Emery. What a breath of fucking fresh air this woman is. Like, holy shit. Top tier, top notch. I just support everything she does. If you didn't watch the episode, go back, cannabisfair.com, cannabisculturecollection.ca, I believe. I could be making a mistake on these. I'll get them into the description of the video once it's edited and done. But go support literally everything she's doing, because she's awesome. She sacrificed a lot. She went through a lot, more than most. I think most people would look at her at an event if they didn't know her and maybe judge the book by the cover and have no idea that she walked through flames for years in support of her ex-husband, Mark Emery, and the work she did with her activism. She ran the magazine. She did so much. And then, of course, as we all know, caught some felony charges as well. So she has a big old criminal record, as she puts it. And she did all of that for cannabis. And believe it or not, she didn't do it for herself. She did it for us. So thank you to you, Jodie, for just being a top tier cannabis warrior, activist, etc. I hope to see you and Etienne connect more, figure things out. I really think Jodie could help veterans in Canada. I want to hook her up with Selena Wong, who's now working with a Compassion Style Club, really focused on veterans here in Canada. I'll be hooking you up with those guys as well, Etienne, because you're at the top of that whole game. Thanks, everybody. I really love you all. I just thank you so much for tuning in every weekend and spending time with us. I'm going to the Slush Cup, and maybe I'll go live on my YouTube channel and share a little bit of it with you guys, because it really, if in the least, I'll make some videos and we'll watch them next week on Hash Church. So thank you so much, everybody. Until next weekend, I bid you adieu. Much love.
Bye, everybody.
Much love.
All right.
Thank you.
Recording stop. Thanks, Wade.
Love you, buddy.
Brother.